Yes. Ready as we'll ever be, I guess.
Okay, I have 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask you to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all and good evening. In accordance with the requirements of open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. I have one announcement. The Eagle House supporters would like to thank everyone who turned out Sunday to see the Red Sox trophy and participate in the wonderful community event. They have a new venture. Lunenburg native and Red Sox historian Gordon Needs is donating 4 tickets behind home plate to a Red Sox game along with a personal tour of Fenway Park. That the game date will be determined mutually by the winner and Gordon. The tickets are going to be $5 or 3 for $10, and the winner will be drawn at the Policeman's Cruise Night on June 12th. Tickets will be available between now and then at the Eagle House and at town functions like the Little League Parade and wherever else they can figure out a good place to sell them. Is there any public comment from the board?
I just wanted to mention that the Lions Club Pancake Breakfast is at the Senior Center tomorrow morning from 8 to 10:30.
And I just had a comment that's more in the form of a question, maybe for Heather or Town Council. I received a question about the charter at town meeting and whether or not amendments can be made, because it seems some people hear yes, some people hear no, and so they were just looking for formal information regarding how the charter goes through, how those warrants go through town meeting and whether or not amendments are allowed or if they're an up and down vote. So are we able to provide that answer?
Town Council, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Floor amendments, like any other amendments at town meeting, are left to the discretion of the moderator. The general rule with respect to a charter is because there's a process that precedes town meeting, where there was a charter review committee and where there was a public hearing on the charter, that any floor amendments would need to be within the scope of what's advertised, what's been advertised, what the public hearing has been held on, and what is ultimately printed in the warrant. That's not to say that there can't be floor amendments, but based on conversations I've had with the moderator, and again, these will be up to him on a case-by-case basis, floor amendments that would be outside the scope of what's been modified, what's been published as modified, will not be permitted, but any modifications that would be within the scope of what's been advertised, what a public hearing was held on, and what is being modified may be permitted in the moderator's discretion. That's my understanding.
So that's why both answers seem correct, then it's just dependent upon the circumstance.
Right. And that's, to some extent, that's always the case when dealing with a charter or a bylaw amendment, that because that's published in the warrant or reference is made in the warrant to a document that's on file with the town, especially when that process includes a public hearing, the floor amendments need to be within the scope of what the public hearing was held on. In this case, although the charter as a whole was considered by the Charter Review Committee, only certain modifications were proposed by that committee and are part of what has been published in the warrant or referred to in the warrant and on file with the town clerk.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Any public comments from the public? Please.
Tom Alonso, 284 Lancaster Avenue. First, I also want to thank the Eagle House supporters for arranging the pictures with the trophy. As many kids growing up as a young boy on Long Island, you grow up thinking you'd be a baseball player. It's nice to know that's as close as I've ever gotten without having to do anything. So it really was a nice event, and I was so glad it was so well attended, and it was a beautiful day. So
Well, it was a lot of fun.
it really was. It really was. And everybody who organized it, it really was orderly, and it was fun, and everybody had their time. So I'm here as on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Boys and Girls Club, reminding everybody for one last week, because the event is on Friday, that the 7th annual Are You Smarter Than a Sixth Grader fundraiser is happening at the Lunenburg High School Middle School on this Friday at 7 p.m. It'll start. We have a full complement of 16 teams and approximately 25 sixth graders participating. Lots of donors, but we're just shy of our goal, so there's still time to get to our goal of $20,000 raised. We're a couple $1,000s short of that, so if anybody wants to donate to that, sponsoring a sixth grader, sponsoring a category, sponsoring a round, that's all available at bgcluboflunenburg.org, BGCLUB of Lunenburg.org. Hope to see everybody there. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's fantastic that they already raised $18,000.
Anyone else? Public comment from the public, please.
Ingrid Cruz Helmer, 141 Canterbury Drive. I just wanted to inform the board and the public of an upcoming speaker that the Lunenburg ROAR, which is the Resources for Opiate Awareness and Recovery, is going to be presenting. The Lunenburg ROAR is a group of concerned citizens who have formed the organization with the mission to increase awareness of substance abuse and the disease of addiction, and to provide fact-based information to encourage healthy choices and safe decision-making, and to provide information about support and resources to those in active addiction or recovery, as well as their families and the community. Our next speaker will be Kate Duffy, who will present a talk entitled Recovery Conversations, A Bridge Between You and Me. Kate is an interventionist and a recovery coach and is the founder of Tipping Point Recovery and Recovery Conversations. Her presentation will focus on her 10 guiding principles of recovery, 10 guiding principles of recovery conversations, which is a proven family recovery model that was developed out of her work with over 150 families over a 2-year period. Her talk will include a little bit of the science of addiction, how to communicate most effectively with those who are not yet ready to begin recovery, and some self-reflection on how our behaviors as loving families may impede recovery. She will also mention this 12-step process and infuse a lot of hope into her presentation. The presentation is free of charge and will take place on Tuesday, April 30th at 6:30 p.m. at the Lunenburg Middle High School. There'll be refreshments and resource tables available at 6. And registration is desired but not required on the Lunenburg ROAR Facebook page. The registrants will be entered into a drawing for a Walmart gift card, as well as a free 2-hour consultation with Kate. We hope that you will attend and help us to spread about this word about this important presentation. Thank you for your time.
Will it be televised and put on YouTube?
I think so. I'm not certain what
I think
the
that would be
status
a
of
great
that.
idea.
Yeah, okay. I think that's the plan.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Any other public comment from the public, please?
Anna Lockwood, 91 Main Street. So last week I finished watching the meeting at home, and there was a lot of conversation about Ms. Lemoux's review, and the town council was here advising you all about, what constitutes a public record or not. But one thing I didn't hear, and it is a question, is does Ms. Lemoux's, I'll never forget it, contract has anything as relates to how her review should be handled? Because if there is something where on her contract says that she will receive 1 review from the board, and if we are publishing 2 reviews, we may be then violating her contract, and that may put us in a create a liability for the town. Is that something that we have looked or considered or just quickly reviewed?
Yes.
Yes.
There are stipulations in the contract as to how the review is to be handled and on what constitutes a board review. And the contract states that it shouldn't be changed except by mutual agreement between the board and the town manager.
Okay. And having a board member making a public record of her personal review, would that be a violation?
Well, that's up to town council. That's why we had it here
Okay.
last week. I mean, that wouldn't fulfill the obligation under the contract.
Right, but
The
would that
contract
violate-
only calls
Right.
for a review written as a joint effort and approved by the
Right.
board.
But my question would be a member would then that be a violation. Maybe that's something we should think about and consider. I don't know. But it was an angle that I didn't think it was explored. But, and I think Ms. Luck's concern, which, you expressed it really well, was that, and correct if I'm wrong, you said that last year you didn't feel that Heather's review reflected your input.
Correct.
And-
Last year, we all got to see each other's evaluations
Right.
at that and when I looked at everyone's evaluations and looked at the evaluation summary made by the chair,
Right.
my input was not considered.
Right. And I think that's very problematic for the board itself, and especially for Heather. I'm just going to go with Heather. I can't pronounce her name. Sorry. Especially for Heather, Ms. Luck, because if Ms. Luck had concerns that were not incorporated into the review, and her concerns probably were not addressed and have compounded over the past year. So that was sort of a disservice for Ms. Luck and for Heather, in my personal opinion, and just the way I see it. But I don't think necessarily making your review public as a matter of public records really going to address, is going to get to the end goal that you'd like. And of course, I'm here to offer a suggestion, because I like doing that. So instead of, all four of you submitting to the chair, maybe all four submit to town council. I know we have an employment town council, maybe that one, your review. And there are a couple points that I don't know if that's part of your process or not, but also create a quick, just create based on Heather's job description, create a review where you can grade her based on her responsibilities, financial responsibility, management of staff, and so forth. So then you are all reviewing her on the same parameters. And all those sections usually in the job will have an open-ended to, add your comments. So because that's important when you're reviewing someone, for everybody to be reviewing the same topics, so that we are not just focusing on one item or the other. And then you can get all of that and submit to council, and he can then create the composite. And the last step that I'll suggest is that then it's voted by the board versus just being an accepted. So that way you also would have an opportunity to vote to have your concern addressed or not. But then we also would have a third party, who's not part of the board making the composite. Anyway, I'll keep going. I think we could easily do that this other way, that we could address everybody's concerns, because I have a concern about, and I'm sorry, Ms. Luck, I do have a concern about you making your personal review a matter of public record. And I think it sets a dangerous precedent for a town. And the precedent that I'm afraid that we're going to create is that if you come to work in Lunenburg, a public official may stain your professional reputation by not following common HR practices that other towns follow. Now, I understand where your frustration is coming from, I really do, but this goes back to a comment that I made in the previous time that I was here, is that sometimes maybe some of the board's dynamics is overspilling to our employees, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. So as I mentioned before, our employers, our job is to make our employees successful. Adding a stain to someone's professional reputation will ensure that the next people who work for us will be people who do not care about their professional reputation, or their reputation could not get any worse. It's just how it goes. And if you think that's the biggest concern, that's not my biggest concern. The biggest concern of having such precedent is that, and not necessarily you per se, but we would have give a public official the ability to sort of become the Lunenburg mayor. Because what will happen is current decent employees will do whatever, and I'm just using your name because it's an example, Ms. Luck. But I'll tell you one thing, I will vote for you if you run for mayor, okay? Because you and I actually overlap in a lot of our stances. But what the biggest problem is if, for example, Ms. Luck would become the mayor, because current employees, they're decent. For their reputation to not become stained, they will follow whatever you ask them to do. And the new employees that we get, who have nothing else to lose, and who probably not get a job elsewhere, will think, how do I keep this job? I'm going to do whatever Ms. Luck will do. So that's one of the reasons that I find it's important for us to really have a good process on how we handle this and how we go about it to really make sure our employees are successful. But your concerns when you were talking last week really resonated with me. So anyway, I appreciate it. I would hope you guys would take in consideration what I said and create a good little process about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I forgot one. I just wanted to say congratulations to Lunenburg's Grange. They had a ceremony on Friday, and they have official charter, so they are now an official Grange, and it was a nice meeting. So congratulations to everybody who got that going.
Sir?
Good evening. Steve Weaver, 288 Holman Street. I want to be respectful to the board, but last week's meeting for the 3 entertainment licenses for 300 Holman Street, the board chair cut off resident participation early. I was very disappointed that I didn't have a chance to voice my concerns as a resident. This is a very important issue to the residents of Holman Street and Windermere Drive. As Mr. Massey continues his quest to run a business by holding these events. I think Bob Ebersol had it correct when he was on the board and said these events are intrusive if held multiple times a year. The entertainment license was denied at that time. Nothing has changed. We all learned how stressful this can be after the Unifier event, when the music going until late at night and people wandering around the woods and the streets at all hours of the night. We purchased our residential property with expectations that we would be able to enjoy the freedom of working during the week and having a peaceful weekend on our property with our families. With the discussion of the special events coming up, I hope that resident participation can be heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say that if we cut off conversation too quickly, I apologize for that. I thought we recognized everybody that wanted to speak. Any other public comment? All righty. Our first order of business tonight is a 7 o'clock appointment. A public hearing on an auto dealer license. Is Carlos Bismarck Terrero here? Okay, we were informed that he may be delayed, and we will move that to later on in the agenda and move on to our next agenda item, which is the 7:05 public hearing on special event permit. The hearing notice, as printed, is the Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on special event permit on Tuesday, April 9th, 2019 at 7:15, and welcomes input from residents. The hearing will be in the Bellata Meeting Room on the second floor of Town Hall, 17 Main Street. Anyone who would like to submit written comments regarding the special event permit application in advance of the meeting should submit them to the Board of Selectmen Office, 17 Main Street, P.O. Box 135, Lunenburg, and that's by the Board of Selectmen Licensing Authority. Now, just to be clear, the original notice said April 2nd, and there was another notice moving the hearing from April 2nd to April 9th, but that was the original hearing notice. So Mr. Burney is here to help us through the draft, which is, if you're looking at it, it is hearing draft number 9, dated April 2019. Do I have the right one?
Yeah, it's actually dated, it's hearing draft
dated 9 April 18.
Okay.
I'm happy to give my time to anybody who wants it. But so we've gone over this several times over the past 9 months. I think this is probably close to draft 9, if it isn't already. And after our last meeting, we got to a point where I think the selectmen were more or less comfortable with what they kind of got to from a perspective of it being your document that you would be using to assist people through granting these types of permits. And so I went and sent it around to board departments and town departments and boards and commissions. And you have a memo from me dated yesterday that reflects the 4 sets of comments I got back. 2 of them were essentially, looks great, just make sure they check in with us. So the Board of Health reviewed it and said, sort of reflective of what the document says, these items are the things the Board of Health covers, sanitary sewers, waste disposal, and food. Please make sure they come and speak to the Board of Health on their intent. We'll tell them if we're okay or not and attach any conditions. DPW director indicated he's willing to be helpful to any department that requests the services. Fire department made 2 requests of changes that I thought weren't outside of the spirit of the original document, so I included them as red line changes in the document that you have. The first being that they asked for an exemption for training activities for local, state, and federal public safety agencies, which aren't particularly public events, but they said they do sometimes hold them on private property, and they felt, the fire chief said, you know, I'd feel more comfortable if this was an exemption, even though I don't know that it particularly qualifies in there. And sometimes they tend to be sensitive in nature. Sometimes they do mock vehicle rescues and other things that they just wanted to have covered. And the second, I don't think changes the spirit of the medical first aid section. It was more adding a reference to Chapter 26 of the Code of Lunenburg, which functionally says that the fire department and their personnel are first to be able to say, we think you need EMTs, we have the personnel to do it. If they say we think you need EMTs, we don't have the personnel, they'll provide contacts with which to do so. So it follows again along with that. And finally, the planning board had a very spirited discussion about the regulations. And you'll see that I think there's about 10 things, 10 categories. There's probably about 15 to 18 things that they recommended or suggested. One of them I put into the document because it was a semantic wording change that I think made it clear. It was, instead of saying Town of Lunenburg property, it was property owned by the Town of Lunenburg. Again, all property that you have jurisdiction over is Town of Lunenburg property, so I thought that was a good clarification. The remainder of their issues, I think, from the perspective of sitting at that meeting and having worked with you on this, seemed paradoxical to some of the things that you had said before. They wanted more specificity. They wanted thresholds. They wanted objective criteria. And some of those things had been included previously, and some of the discussion was, we need to take this objective criteria out because these events are very fluid. They cover a wide-ranging area. So I was hesitant to go ahead and make substantial structural changes that change the character of the document. So what I did is I put this memo together and outlined them for you. I don't know if you'd like to go through them. I tried to put them in the order that they're in the document so that it kind of flows in a reasonable way. Their first concern was the definition of special event and whether there should be a person threshold. We had a 50-person threshold previously. The board felt that that was unnecessary and might cause confusion with things like birthday parties or family parties or invitation-only things that might get caught up in that. We could continue with the public events on private property greater than a certain size, but I don't know how the board feels about parsing it out to that detail. And the other thing in the definition section was the planning board was looking for some inclusion of zoning. And you'll remember that probably in the third or fourth draft, we had some discussion about property zoning and its implications on this. And the board felt that they wanted to take that out to avoid confusion of something that was codified as zoning and something that is a license. So where these processes are parallel instead of intermingled. So again, I'm not sure how you would like to think about that or address that.
Excuse me, in that part, Adam, are you saying in the sense that this applies mostly to residential properties, whereas a commercial property by nature may have events and things that aren't needing permits?
That's one facet of it. The other is it's a license or a permit from the Board of Selectmen as a licensing authority. And as we've learned over the last month with the entertainment licenses, there's a process here and then there's a zoning process here. And this sort of falls into that same category where you're permitting something that is not a long-term or a consistent thing. It's
So like an auto dealership could have a special event, a big open house and whatnot. We wouldn't want that to fall into this.
Correct. And that...
Is it spelled out that it isn't? Should it probably be an exemption that, I feel like commercial places oftentimes have these open house or events or things that would
Well, and
actually
again-
meet the definition.
And I think that's
wouldn't-
something that we talked about with the artist open house and other events that happen within the bounds of an existing commercial enterprise is a public space is a private space that the public is invited into.
Correct, so it sort
So
of
it-
starts
it-
to
it
fall
sort of
into
is,
this, but
it's-
maybe shouldn't.
But it's, yeah, and I guess...
I don't want to be giving permits to auto dealerships to have like an open house and serve hot
But
dogs.
I don't think that that's a special event. That's just a function of their business.
Perhaps, yeah. They're open to the public anyways. On
Correct.
private. So
It-
by
it's-
their own nature, they don't,
Correct, and I think that's something that we talked about.
this is really a residential
But
circumstance.
commercial property is also private property, right?
Right, that's why I think instead of saying private property, we might want to say something to do with residential, because technically we might be putting these rules on those places because the auto dealership is private property and they're having an event. Well, I don't think that we intend to permit events at stores
No,
and
I
dealerships. So
don't think that was the
maybe
intent.
some sort of wording in there in terms of the private property part of it, spelling out that it's a really a residential circumstance. I think that all this revolves around.
Private, non-commercial property? I don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
Then but what about farms that have events that would trigger this?
I mean,
I mean, I see what you're saying, but there's, day-to-day operations. If someone's having a tent sale down at their hardware store, you don't need an entertainment license for that. But someone with a commercial property, anyone with a large amount of space could host an event that certainly would fit something that's not part of their day-to-day operations.
And I think also if you think about it and say non-commercial property, there's a substantial piece of commercial property that's vacant, and someone decides they want to hold a unifier style event or a biker rally, or even just, have pony rides and have everybody come down and, hang out. There isn't a business there isn't anything there, but it's still a commercial property, or it's a non-residential property. So does that exempt it out from this, even though they're inviting the public onto private
I
property?
guess I just want to make sure we're not setting something up where we're technically needing to permit something we
And
don't
I
want to
appreciate that,
permit.
and I understand that angle, and it's, well, and I guess if you were to do that, then an exemption would need to be commercial activities
at pre-existing commercial.
Yeah, associated with a business
Business.
located on site, in conjunction with the conducting of that business.
Yeah.
That's not even English, but
No, but I think an exemption like that would make it so that we don't inadvertently start needing to do, thousands of permits. We'd have to start meeting on extra nights and stuff, just.
Can't you have a clause in there that says, the Board of Selectmen can modify or,
I'd like it to be concrete, though.
it's not going to be totally concrete. And another thing is, a special permit shouldn't be so arduous that people are killing themselves to get one. If it is, then we're going down the wrong path to begin with. So, if the Stillman's Fair needed to get a special permit, then they'd need to get a special permit. I mean, it shouldn't be so awful that people go, I'm just not going to do it because, boy, getting a permit is ridiculous.
I think sometimes perception and reality aren't the same. I don't think that anything outlined in here is particularly difficult, and I don't think it's particularly different than things that the town currently does. I think what it does is coalesces everything into a single authority for the overarching of it, and it gives this body some knowledge that is probably more inclusive than it has been in the past for permitting events like this. Stillman's is a great example. They have worked with the town. They've worked with the departments that would work through this same process. They start, I would expect to see them starting soon, if they haven't already started having conversations about what they're going to do in the fall. And now we're going on to 4 or 5 years that they've done it, so everything starts to hum along a little bit easier. They have an understanding of what they've done, but a lot of times this board might not be involved, and maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's not a good thing. Maybe it keeps everybody involved and gives a path for people who, and Stillman started this on their own. They blazed the trail and went and knocked on doors and said, hey, we're going to work with the Lions Club. We want to do this. It's a fundraiser. Let's get as much input as we can. Some people come into town and we're like, oh, I just want to do this. And, they don't have a direction, and this gives them some guidance and some functional direction on where to go, which they can get through talking to people, but not having any idea how to do it can sometimes make it harder for people to want to approach it.
Okay, another question is, who in town will keep track of the properties and the quantity of events, like the 4 events? Where does that information come through and where is it kept?
Well, as the selectman is the licensing authority,
That
I
would
would
be
expect
through
it would
like a
be through
lane or
yeah.
someplace, that would be kept, and then somebody would come in and that would be triggered. And then the other question with an exemption, and I know the origin of this, the events held by private membership organizations where only members and guests are permitted. So I think that goes back to like Pirate Day at the Hickory Hills Beach, but then kind of curious as you read through that if it creates a loophole if somebody defines what as a private membership
Correct,
organization.
and this was something that the planning
And so
board had
there's
brought
such a
up.
loophole there that anybody can sort of designate themselves as a group or organization, and then I don't think that should circumvent the rules or the ability. So,
Oh, and you also could have a small membership organization that invites 300 guests.
yeah, so I feel like that one exemption creates this loophole where somebody could say, I'll take that private membership organization, and almost people could sign up to be a member of something as it's occurring without more clearly defining what's happening in that exemption.
I think you could drive a truck through that exemption.
Yeah, it feels like a loophole.
Well,
But I know
and-
where it came from because I'm
Correct, and
thinking
it
of all
was-
these
It was added
events.
through discussions with the board. We can remove that, but then you're back into is this private membership organization holding an
I think you need
event
to
that's public.
define what is a private membership organization. So like an association like Hickory Hills, that's very clearly defined. So I don't know the right answer, but I think you can't just have like pop-up organizations to meet the need of an event.
But what would prevent, well, I guess my question is, how much research are you looking for staff to do on membership organizations? Because they're something that gets created on a regular basis, and if you say a new neighborhood or some new club forms, and the Grange, they're a membership organization, and they've just been rechartered, and you have a clause that says membership organizations that haven't existed for more than 18 months are unable to gain that exemption. And they come to you and they're like, but we're the Grange, we're a membership organization, we just got chartered. We need to go through this process even though we're having a members only event. So I get what you're saying. I'm trying to wrap my head around how we would alter
May I make a
that.
process suggestion? This is a hearing, and let's articulate the issues that we have to discuss and deliberate on, all right? That one in particular was one that did come from the planning board. There's several more. I think there's one or two memos from the public, and then we can take information from people that are here tonight for the hearing, and then we can either address them or put them on a list to address them if we need more data.
Okay.
Okay? So let's just kind of articulate what are the open issues, and one is membership organizations.
And I think another one the board brought up, which I think is a good question, is with the number of events, they would like to see it codified in zoning. I think we've discussed this, that's a difficult thing to sort of nail down. But with the number of events, is it per address? Is it per lot? Is it per owner? And would contiguous parcels under common ownership constitute a single lot like they may with zoning? Or would you be able to parse it out where, okay, I did that on, parcel 7, now I'm going to have this other one here on parcel 8. My thought would be that it would be per address, and contiguous lots under common ownership would be counted as a single lot. But again, I don't think per property owner, because property owners can own disparate pieces of property in various places, and perhaps the different events are better suited to different areas.
Would per address work?
And
Different lots don't have different addresses typically.
No, but
It might.
and I would think that sometimes you might, but I would say contiguous properties under common ownership would be considered as a single parcel for the count of event, just because.
Also under exemptions, I don't know why it has to, sporting events, where is it? The
By the Lunenburg Public Schools and the Lunenburg Parks Department?
We don't want to permit football games.
Well, that was the issue, is football games.
Why
youth
is it, why
sports.
wouldn't it just be events approved by the Lunenburg Public Schools or the Lunenburg Parks Department? Why does it have to be sporting?
That's a good point, because it could be a band concert,
Right. I
I
mean,
think-
if the school system is,
a school-sanctioned event. That's a good point. The athletes can do as they wish. Everybody else, come get your permit.
and also I would think that the
I think
library should, if the Parks Department is mentioned, why wouldn't the library be mentioned?
They do have a lot of events
Right.
by nature.
Just if we're ticking off things, areas. of
Well, town
concern.
events on town property would cover the library.
Everybody. I guess that's all you need. You don't even have to go to examples.
So then why do you need sporting events approved by the Lunenburg Public Schools or the Lunenburg Park Department?
It
Maybe
was
town
It was
events.
suggested by the board that we also cover sporting events. I think with the Parks Department and the school department, I think that was included to cover youth sports, which take advantage of school property and park properties. That
Anyone
often
wants to
draw the
field.
public in and may cause someone to raise a concern that this is a private event, Lunenburg Youth Soccer, Lunenburg Youth Baseball, or Little League, I don't know what they call it, is a private event being held on public property. So I think the
You have
idea...
adult leagues that rent the fields too.
Correct. And I think the
Does-
discussion was...
Oh, I see, so the Parks Department or the public schools.
Correct, because they lease the fields to those private organizations.
Okay, all right.
The timing, the planning board suggested that there be a clause that the Board of Selectmen may limit the scope or timing of use of amplification devices. I probably should have included that in the red line because that kind of goes without saying, but
Well, for one thing, I think if you have something in the whole permit that the Board of Selectmen can modify it, you only have to say that once.
you mean condition it?
Make modifications, yeah, condition it, you know, the Board of
Well,
Selectmen can change the rules.
Are we talking about waivers or conditions?
I guess I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, waivers would be you see something in here that you decide someone doesn't need to do or abide by. A condition would be that you're putting specificity on how something is applied. So a waiver would be, you know what, you can start at 2 o'clock in the morning. We're going to waive the 6 o'clock time limit, the 6 a.m. time limit. A condition would be, we're going to allow you to start at 6 o'clock, but you can't start your loudspeaker until 9:30.
So I guess maybe a condition then. But also on timing, I still think 6 a.m. is too early.
We had that problem, we don't know the nature of the event, like if it's a fishing tournament.
And again, the board can individually condition an event that you can't start this event at 6 a.m. There may be
Like a marathon or...
well, there could be a kids' road race where somebody needs to be out there to set up the tables and the water jugs and the timer and the ribbons and all that at 6 a.m. and maybe the race starts at 7:30. The event is still technically starting at 6 because people are showing up to start doing what theoretically could be quiet work. And I think the thought process was, these are the absolute limits of
How
events.
about events are prohibited from conducting public activities? So you can set up, but you can't start dancing.
Well,
I really think it's something we should be able to condition based on what they're asking for.
I just think 6 is too early. I don't know why you'd have to start before 6 a.m.
You're not up at 6 a.m.?
I am, but
She's not in an event.
that's my input, that's all. We're looking for things that we want to discuss.
with traffic and parking, the planning board suggested a detailed calculation of parking requirements for events. Number of persons, number of spaces per number of persons, 1 space per 2 people, 1 space per 4 people, something to that effect, so that you can determine how much parking may be needed. It's a very zoning approach. It's a very objective approach. I think I understand where it comes from. I think with a lot of these events, it's sometimes hard to determine how many people may come. So you plan parking for the best case scenario that you can. I'm not opposed to putting parking numbers in there, but the board had previously said they wanted to try and be as, I don't want to say, they didn't want to put too much objective criteria in here to allow for the variance between events.
I think there's going to be some events that are kind of driven to pedestrians, and then you have stuff in there that you don't really need. I think that's one that we probably could do on a case-by-case
And I
basis.
think having parking guidance makes sense, because that's probably one of the biggest nuisance or problematic things for abutters and people if there's some sort of chaotic distribution of hundreds of cars.
And again, I mean, I understand where it comes from. I think that with what we're dealing with, it's so wide-ranging that there isn't a singular applicable metric for this
But we're s-
parking is going to work.
But we're saying
across
they need a
boards.
parking plan approved by the police. I
Correct.
think that's good enough.
The buffer zone could be more explicitly defined. What constitutes the buffer? Are activities allowed within it? First aid and medical, there should be a threshold, or should there be a threshold for the requirement of EMTs? My understanding was that was at the discretion of the fire chief based on his understanding of the event, and again, due to the wide variation in events and potential events. Should the town require alcohol liability insurance on events? I know that when the board issues one-day licenses, that's included in the one-day license. I think this was more for events that don't get a one-day license. The suggestion that alcohol liability may be pertinent in case individuals attending the event were to bring their own refreshments and there was to be some harm or damage. Again, I'm not an insurance agent or a lawyer, so I don't know how much the general liability would cover as far as if someone were to partake of their own alcohol at an event. And there was a suggestion that concentrating on multi-day events would be not doing special event permits for a single day event, but only doing it for multiple day events because they tend to have more impact and a wider scope and potentially have more disruptive capacity. And the last question was, what is the appeal process for those who feel an event was improperly permitted or who are denied a permit?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And my understanding is that there's an appeal process within your policies now. And if I'm not mistaken, it would be through the courts, but I could be incorrect about that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then I also received an email, which I believe was forwarded to you, from Dave Passios. It's a little less direct. It does have some things in here. It skips around a little bit more. So with the restrooms and trash and cleanup, there's a clause in there within a specified time. He's recommending that the board attach a time in general, maybe 48 hours unless conditions are set at the time of permitting. And that would be for events have within that period of time to clean up before the town would take over and do the cleanup and bill them. He makes several recommendations about attaching appendices that give further detail. Chapter 332 of the code, attaching that as an appendice for parking. In signs, deleting the second sentence. The one that starts, no signs may be affixed to trees, buildings, or street furniture, and replacing it with approved signs may also be required by the town. May also be required by the town of Lunenburg to assist in traffic control and to communicate temporary restrictions during the event. I think that's a good addition. Honestly, I think that I don't think there's a need to delete the second sentence, but perhaps add that sentence in as the second sentence and leave the third sentence, or leave the second sentence and make it the third sentence. Smoking prohibited in or on all town of Lunenburg properties, including on school grounds and all parks, fields, or playgrounds.
That's there already, isn't it?
Yeah, I think he's wordsmithing it to something that he feels is a better text, and I would defer to the board. I'm not married to anything that I've written. tents and trailers, and this is one that I missed in my edits. The building code requirement is 400 square feet. I misunderstood a conversation I had when I first wrote this, and I did double check with the building commissioner this morning. So it would be tents over 400 square feet. That is codified in the building code, and that's for commercial tents. This wouldn't be, if, I don't know if they make 400 square foot sleeping tents, but this would be those big white tents that you see tables under or people cooking under, and they require flammability resistance, and they have to have all their certifications, and they do require a permit to be installed and inspection upon installation. So that is actually a building code requirement which we can't alter. And Mr. Passios is suggesting tents and required permitting by the town of Lunenburg building inspector. See Appendix 2 for more details. Sleeping trailers must also comply with any appropriate regulation under MGL, Fire Department policy, and Board of Health regulations. For more details, see Appendix 2 of the package. Create an Appendix 2 to provide additional details. And I think I understand where he's going with this, and in using existing regulations and laws, and if the board wants, we can certainly research that and get that information in there. The tents are building code, sleeping trailers, and this came up with the planning board as well. And what if someone brings a not pop-up sleeping trailer for their own relaxation at an event, and I'm not necessarily married to keeping sleeping trailers, but I've worked in communities where we've had fairs or circuses or something, and the carnies and the people who work there come in, and they've got their fifth wheel, they pull it in and they set it up, and they require that they be inspected to ensure that they're putting their sewerage in the right place, and that they're they have water hookups for the time that they're there and that kind of stuff. But again, I defer to the board on whether or not you think that's necessary here, if it's something that you want to include, if it's something that you'd like to take out. The buffer zone, I'm not sure I fully understand the comment. It's after supported input from abutters and documentation for the reason of the request. And it says the BOH. I'm gonna infer that that's the Board of Selectmen. I don't know why you'd be used to writing BOH. And the scope of the event, and I think, and please feel free when I'm done, Dave, to stand up and correct me. I believe that what he's indicating is that as part of the hearing process for this, he's looking to codify that the board will take information from abutters, documents from the applicant for the reason for the request, and then take into account the scope of the event on, the reduction of the buffer. And I think we've had a couple of go-arounds with the buffer and reducing it and what qualifies. So I'll let him further clarify that. In the first aid medical, he suggests adding a list of EMS contacts. I would defer to the fire chief on whether he thinks that that's appropriate. I think oftentimes when they make a referral, it could be a changing landscape, and I don't want to certainly prejudge anything. Page 4, and this is something that came up, and you'll see this in the flow chart on the back. This was a suggestion from the planning board, and it makes sense that insurance is a prerequisite, and that it not be a prerequisite, but it be a prerequisite to final issuance. So we lay out what insurance they need. The board determines the event is adequate, and prior to handing over any final permit, they provide the insurance binder that says this is the value of it. And then Mr. Passios makes an editorial comment about the length of prose and whether this is a policy or an application document, and his feeling that it shouldn't serve as both.
Thank you.
That's all the public input that I've received to date. I think you mentioned having 2 citizen
Okay,
letters, so I don't know if
I
there's
wasn't sure.
another.
Hold on.
I guess I'm a citizen too, so maybe you do have 2.
There's only one in the packet. Okay, so it was from the planning board and from one citizen. Okay, I'm going to ask anyone else who would like to speak or ask a question, please.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. I apologize for the haphazard setup of this. I only had a short couple hours last night to deal with it. As I told Adam in the email, this would have been a first draft normally for me. I would have gone through it a couple more times. Just to clarify on the buffer zone issue, the rest of it Adam covered very well and accurately as to what I was trying to bring across. On the buffer zone, I just felt if you were going to consider altering the offset that was set in the policy, that you should have some additional information to make that decision, including from the abutters and a reason from the applicant as to why he felt he needed that.
You're
waiver.
using offset and buffer interchangeably, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
okay,
buffer,
okay,
buffer.
fine,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. So in other words, you have the 100 feet or whatever you decide to put in there as the buffer set in the policy, but if you entertain, say, a motion to alter that buffer zone, that distance, then have this type of documentation to consider that. That's all that was about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Tom Alonso, 284 Lancaster Avenue. I have a couple of questions. First of all, is it the intent of the board that this would come before a town meeting?
I was going to make a statement on that, but why don't you?
Well, I know that there's a citizen's petition.
Yeah, okay, to
So-
clarify that, this process was put in place quite a while ago, and it was the intent of the board for us to draft what we were calling a policy or a guideline, at which point we were going to hopefully agree on it as the Board of Selectmen and issue it as a policy or guideline, use it for a while, and at some future town meeting, assuming it worked and it was doing the job we intended it to, at some future town meeting, make a recommendation to turn it into a bylaw. As you mentioned, there is a citizen's petition on the current town meeting warrant for May that does 2 things. One is it creates 2, the warrant asks the town to approve 2 zoning bylaws, one that creates something called exhibit and workshops, and one that creates a bylaw as opposed to guidelines for special events. The wording in that citizen's petition is somewhat similar to our draft.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the reasons I asked town council to be with us tonight, is to clear up what happens this and what happens that. But it is 2 separate things. Our hearing tonight is about a proposed guideline that we probably won't, I know we won't have it on this town meeting because it's not on the warrant, but regardless of what happens at town meeting, the Board of Selectmen may or may not issue it as a guideline. Obviously, if the bylaw gets passed, it probably won't get issued, but if the bylaw doesn't get passed, it may be issued as a guideline or a bylaw, a guideline or a policy at some point in the future.
So if I may,
Sure.
let's just, in a hypothetical, that the citizen's petition was not submitted, you're saying you were going to require a special permit of this scope and not bring this to town meeting? And you're going to just, as a Board of Selectmen, just implement it?
Well, we currently do have a special events license authority, but we felt it was incomplete, so we were going to make it more complete, use it for a while, and bring it to the next available town meeting to make it a bylaw.
That would be my first suggestion, is that I wouldn't implement it as a policy.
Well, if somebody comes in tomorrow afternoon, Tom, and asks for one, we have to do something.
Well, right, I know, I fully understand
And
that.
that's
I
the
understand
point.
that. Well, with the citizens petition, one of the things that you may have available, and you certainly have town council here, is that you could draft something and amend all the things that you have, because they're basically off the same template. You could basically amend the article and just say, we want to submit these changes, and just put all the changes that you've talked about. So that would at least clarify it with people. I don't know if would be allowed under a citizen's petition to do that. I think you're allowed to amend it. So they're going to have a special permit, and you have a special permit that you're having a hearing, a special event permit you're having a hearing for. I think things can get really confusing really quickly. And the reason I ask you that is because it will determine my comments, here about the...
This process was put in motion and the hearing scheduled before we even...
No, I know how...
Before we knew there was
right,
going to be a citizens petition.
I know, yeah, I'm fully aware of that, so I just wanted to know that.
So what you're saying is that the town could offer some amendments to the citizens petition on the floor?
Yeah.
And
Otherwise, what you're doing here, if that doesn't happen, and as the chair just said, if that citizens petition passes, then what are you going to do? You go back right after it was passed and then change it all again? That sounds very confusing, too.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean...
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think my stance would be that I would probably support us continuing with our process, because we've been going through and working with Adam and having a lot of discussion and hypothesizing about what ifs and I feel like passing something just to try to rush through something at town meeting to make a bylaw. There's a lot of things with the selectmen that are under selectmen created policies. So it's not abnormal to have a policy to support the things we do. So I don't think there's anything like disingenuous or unusual about creating a policy to support an authority that the board has. And I'm comfortable with what we've been doing so far.
But if the special permit on the warrant passes as is, then
I'd say we
then that
can
will be the
just
bylaw, right?
advocate to not
they're
support it as a board, since it goes against the process that we've been working on.
Oh, yeah, you certainly could do that, but doesn't necessarily mean
Correct.
you'll get the outcome you're looking for.
Thank you.
Any other input? Please.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street again. My comments at the end of my submission in regards to this whole process kind of was alluding to the fact that, in my mind, if we do put bylaws in place, and I'm not sure that Maytown meeting, what's submitted there is the appropriate one, but it's a start and it opens the discussion. Whether it passes or fails, it opens discussion with the taxpayers. But we could have, over time maybe, the bylaw, as you were talking about before, created, so that gives you your guidelines, but the Board of Selectmen could still have their policy that works off of those guidelines, and/or their policy matches what is handed directly to an applicant. I think that's the most important thing that needs to be developed, is the process and a packet to hand to an applicant that's fairly easy to understand and gives them all of the steps that they need to do to get through the process. So there's actually three things involved here. There's a bylaw that gives you the guidelines, there's a policy that helps the board implement those guidelines, and then the wording of the packet that goes to the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask town council a question?
Sure.
If we have a policy that we pass, like let's say, I don't think we're quite ready because it needs some edits, but we pass a policy, and then the bylaw pass and they don't match, which one?
Controls,
Yeah,
the bylaw.
okay.
You could implement your policy to the extent that it would be consistent with the bylaw, but in terms of the hierarchy, it's state statute, local bylaws or ordinances, rules and regulations, policies.
Sir.
Steve Weaver, 288 Holman Street. I have a question. The special events, is that going to be overnight tenting? If it's will it be will we have multiple day events? So somebody could go up to Shady Point with 500 people and pitch a tent.
Well, Shady Point is currently a campground, and they are allowed to have overnight camping.
Okay, so they could have 500 people there, and
Well, I think Shady Point isn't the best example because their business revolves around
okay,
things like this.
300 Holman.
So this policy does allow for multiple day events, not to exceed 4 days. And it would be up to the selectmen at the time that they were issuing the permit to determine whether that was appropriate within the location.
Okay, so there's a total of 4 days that can be used in the course of a year?
There's a total
Is
of
that what
4
we're-
events, and multiple day events cannot exceed 4 days,
So I guess 16 days worth of
theoretically.
eventing would be maximum per
Yes.
property.
Then that's almost a business, because if you have one every weekend during the summer, every Saturday and Sunday, there's the whole summer. And that can be very punishing on people. It can also affect local businesses, because if somebody is having food carts and feeding people and selling meals and everything, the town collects a meal tax at restaurants and everything. Well, the local business could be hurt by that if there's no meal tax involved. And they're actually running a business. So they don't have to go by the same rules as a business does, even though they're reaping the benefits of it. So that seems a little confusing to me. One other thing is that these are going to be issued by the Board of Selectmen.
This is a draft guideline policy
Right.
that if we finalize it and vote it to be a guideline or policy, it will be by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. I'm just wondering if it should be under the zoning board, or in conjunction with the zoning board, so that way zoning could be taken into effect during that situation, and the wetlands and everything around that whole area. And if it is, a good thing would be to add to the end, like Phyllis was saying, maybe the discretion of the selectmen could be at the end of that instead of the other thing. And who's going to police these events? If a license is given out, who is going to be the policing event to say that, okay, we're going to allow 500 people? Who's going to say that there's not 600? Who's going to say that there's not 700 people? The person that's running the event? I don't think so. Or what would they say afterwards? They just beg for forgiveness? So I think there's a lot of things that really have to be taken into consideration when these licenses are issued, because it is very important to the people that are the abutters. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That would bring up a question I have, Adam. If somebody does violate a permit, what would your recommendation be in terms of how we would document or express that, in terms of like issuing future permits, that if violations are found, then, future permit requests may be, like almost like a little
You
caveat
mean
in
as
there.
in putting in some sort of...
Just like a warning that if you don't follow, then, future permits may be denied or something of those natures, just to enforce the importance of follow-through. That way, if, public safety is called to an event, there's 1,000 people there, it's grossly unrelated to what was asked for. Where is that documented, and how does that, follow through, or how does that information stay with the property? So we have that information in like an upcoming hearing or an upcoming ability to deny based on that.
Well, I'm not sure how your record keeping works in the office, but what I would expect is that there'd be a note in whatever special event or file goes along with each property. And if there were an event that was double the size, I have a feeling the selectmen would remember, and the next time that person came, they would, indicate that they didn't feel that they operated in good faith the last time.
Maybe at the end of
So you're looking for something in the document that sort of
documenting
outlines
that
that.
if you do not follow future
Sure.
permits for this property,
I mean, it could
may
be
be
quite a bit.
denied.
It could be done the way they do liquor license violations, so similar to that, right? You've got a violation on record, and so it
And sort of
affects.
define that violations are a possibility and that it will impact the future.
And I think, we have an enforcement section. Currently, it just talks about removing people from events. We could beef that up to include violations of the permit or the conditions and implications of that. Again, I'm not intimately familiar with your policies, and perhaps town council can
Yeah, I was gonna
give me an
ask-
assist here.
I was gonna ask town council
There might
to
be a non-criminal
weigh in on-
disposition
On
section in
violations
there.
of either guidelines or bylaws.
Sure. So you need to include something in the bylaw or the guideline or policy that specifies how you intend to enforce it. So that includes, and I understand that the current version references the removal of individuals in the event of a violation of rules or regulations or conditions of a permit. But in the sense that there may be circumstances where the owner or operator is violating the permit that's issued, you want to have the ability, number one, particularly if it's a multi-day function, to revoke the permit such that the function can't continue. If there's a violation on the first day or the second day and it's a 4-day event, that the permit is thereby revoked. That requires generally board action. So you'd have to meet on short notice, emergency circumstances, to revoke the permit. But certainly in terms of being somewhat forward-looking, I would recommend, and I think it's a good suggestion, that there be some provision in that enforcement mechanism that would give you the ability to refuse future permits. Maybe it's for a particular period of time. Maybe you've got some sort of, as I think was suggested, some sort of progressive penalty scheme where it's not necessarily that after the first violation there be a prohibition for a 1-year period of any other permit that would issue. Maybe it's a 6-month period, and if there's a second violation, then no further permit shall issue for a period of a year. And if it's a third violation, no permit should issue for a period of 2 years. So that, I think that makes some sense. I think you've also got to be careful, because no matter how you structure a bylaw, a policy, a guideline, individuals, entities will try and find a way they'll find workarounds. So you touched upon it a bit earlier when you talked about the same premises versus premises with the same address versus contiguous lots in common ownership. So I think similarly with respect to enforcement, it's that no, future permit shall issue for a period of X number of months or X number of years to the owner or operator or affiliate of the owner or operator for the premises or any other premises owned by that. Because if you just say for that property, then they're just going to move to the adjacent lot or to a nearby property and hold it somewhere else in 2 months. If you say for that particular owner, then you can guarantee the next application you get for a similar event is going to have a different name on it.
Right.
Would you be able to submit that language and concept?
Sure.
That we can
I can work with Adam
put
to.
it into that?
Absolutely.
Great.
Adam, you brought up a key point about revoking a license during an event. In your opinion, would that qualify as an emergency to call a board meeting without notice?
It would, and you could also, you've given some authority within the policy or the guidelines to, I think, police, fire, and town manager with respect to enforcing rules and regulations. You could also give authority in circumstances certainly where the public health or public safety are endangered to allow those individuals to immediately issue a cease and desist, essentially, that required that event to stop. But yes, I do believe you'd need to meet to take more formal action, and that would constitute an emergency under the open meeting law, so you could conduct that meeting on less than 48 hours' notice if need be.
Okay, thank you. Sir?
Great suggestion. Came from Mr. Weaver's comments. It was like, oh yeah.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street again. I'd like to speak to the economic impact of events like this from the other perspective, and that is that local events, I think, have very little effect on the local businesses, other than people are out and about, especially in that vicinity of town. So any convenience stores, gas stations may actually get a tick up, even on local events. Events that pull people in from out of town, that's a boom for everybody in the area. Yes, it may impact the restaurants a little bit, but even they're going to get some spillover from the people coming into the area. And that's quantifiable. And it is quantified in many towns. And even Unifier was able to do that, but nobody asked for the figures. It was done after the fact. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm getting ready to close the hearing portion of this. Anybody, okay, come on up.
Anna Lockwood, 91 Main Street. I'm thinking back about a couple of things that were said in terms of, where should be, and I think you were talking about, public events held in a private location, and also public events that's held in the business. And I think we had a little bit, it was difficult to define, but I think anything that's in a business that is not, I think the business is the part that we can actually apply the zoning bylaw as a way to see if that can be done there or not. And, the church is a great example. We don't sell alcohol, we give alcohol on Sunday Mass, but we don't sell there, so therefore you would need a license. So I think that's how you would see. But on the residential, I think it's a little different. But then I look at this list, that's what's defined as special event, and then I think about what the Mr. Rhodes had listed on his list, and I'm wondering how does the two kind of merge? What's Mr. Rhodes' interpretation of how many events Darren had on his house, and therefore he was in violation, or he needed a special event? So I'm not sure. Do we have these special? What is a special event? Well defined, so that we don't.
Mr. Rhodes did not specify any events were in violation. He just
Right.
he only had hearsay that there were 29.
Right.
So
I know, but nevertheless, he listed them all as events that happened and they were in violation.
no, he said he didn't say that they were in violation. He just said he had heard there were 29 events.
And then he gave a cease and desist letter. But my point more is are we really looking into what one really thinks is truly a special event, and maybe bounce this less against what Mr. Rhodes wrote? So just as an idea of trying to really understand, because I'm not sure everything that if I want to host my friend's wedding in my house, I don't think it falls in here.
It doesn't, because it's private to private. If the wedding generally wouldn't be open to the public, so it wouldn't trigger this policy.
Okay.
A wedding's private.
I couldn't just walk down Main Street and go, hey, look at that, I'm gonna go join that wedding.
Okay, if I have a fundraiser for a charity event that, is within the club that I'm part of, and I say, it's a fundraiser, I want to get as many people in as possible, is that considered a public event?
If you invite the
Probably if you
public.
invite the public. I was actually wondering about, the Lions Club does meat bingo. They're not doing it in Lunenburg right now, but if they did it in Lunenburg, would that be a special event?
Right.
I was just trying to
yeah.
think of different,
Right. No, and St. Boniface, I heard, I haven't been to church recently, but I heard there you go. I heard they're doing masses in homes, in different people's home. I think that is an event of such nature. Is that considered a public event, and therefore do they need the?
Oh, I don't think we
You
get
know.
involved in the church. That's a no.
No, but I think that is a
Separation of
thing.
church and
Yeah,
state.
but I think that is a thing. They're held, and I actually remember growing up when my mom was, she would have rosaries that people would come to her house and pray, and it was always open to whoever would want to come.
We're not getting involved in church
No,
events.
but the thing is that public?
We
How do you
definitely
define it?
got the message that we have to define special event a little more carefully.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with regard to things like Meat Bingo, the ones they've had so far have been held in event halls who are licensed to do that stuff. They went and had them, and they weren't in Lunenburg.
Well, they had it in the Sportsman Club in Lunenburg.
Well, the point is that
club can
club
do
is
it.
licensed to do that.
That's
Okay,
their-
yeah, all right.
Right.
So
right,
I'm not
so I'm
trying to
gonna-
cause trouble, I was just trying to figure out.
I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you very much for all your input. We have to choose whether we want to deliberate tonight or take the information we have, organize it, come up with a list of questions, and put it on a future agenda to deliberate.
I'd vote for that.
One suggestion I have, and it's at the pleasure of the board, but I mean, the very first thing we said is you got to file for one of these 60 days before you're going to have the event. And the annual town meeting is within 60 days. So we're going to get some input from the town just in terms of their temperature relative to this whole, special event. We're going to find out if they're kind of leaning towards it or leaning against it. There may be some open questions about what it actually entails. There may be some amendments proposed or passed or not passed. Even if it doesn't pass, we'll get a sense of what the temperature of the town is. I don't think, in agreement with Mrs. Adams, that we should rush to try to get something done prior to town hall. I think we should, we should take town meeting as a data point for us to help to get a feel for how the town feels about this, because it's certainly going to be more people than what we've heard from here. But I do think we should continue to work on this process. I think we have a lot of input from the planning board. We have input from citizens that have written in. We have what we picked up tonight at the public hearing. But I will suggest that if we want to entertain some discussion right now in terms of what we believe should be on our future agendas, we can go ahead and do that now.
Sure.
This is the biggest event on our agenda tonight.
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
may, just as way of organization for my addled mind, I want to just run through and touch on the things that I took away that the board still had some questions or wanted to clarify a little bit further. The first, and I'm going to go through it in sequential order of the document, not in
Okay,
the
hold
And
on.
order
Mr.
that I
Chair,
have
if
them.
I may, because I think this is where I was headed, is that you're looking for a summary of everything you want to come back to us.
Correct.
And before we do that, what I was going to say is we all have like a speak now or forever hold your peace of the specific things that we're looking for changes or edits on, which I think is what you're looking to make sure
Yeah,
that we're.
and so
Because we keep doing the same process every time this comes up.
Correct.
And it would be nice to be concrete. And I'm completely comfortable with everything here except, and if we each do that, then you know exactly.
yeah, and what I'd like to
Edit
do
it
is hit
one
the ones
last
that I
time.
have, and then let you each give me the input that, oh, you missed this,
Okay.
or because I think I have some of them. If-
Can we
if-
just go through it once, though? And, if we have something, we do it at that moment instead of going through the whole thing 4 times?
That's a good idea.
That's fine.
Okay.
So in the special event, the first 2 paragraphs, I have that you want to define special event more clearly, and that kind of it's somewhat nebulous, but it also dials into including discussions about businesses and commercial premises. I have a similar note about that under exemptions, but we'll get there in a minute. And maybe including some compare and contrast of the list of events to zoning per the previous speaker's recommendation. So that's what I have in the first one, is trying to dial the definition in more. I feel like this is something that we've done a half a dozen times, and every time we change it, someone else has a different take on it. So I'm struggling with that, I guess, but it's something that clearly needs more attention. So we'll see what we can get for that.
Just to give Adam a chance to think, I would like to ask him to weigh in a little bit on how our permitting process, whether it be called a guideline or policy, interplays with the zoning things. And
May I comment on that?
Sure,
I
if you want to,
wanted
sure.
I wanted to make a comment at the appropriate time, but I have it in my notes from about 45 minutes ago because it's a bit of a concern to me. I think that some acknowledgement of the existence of zoning control. So it was discussed again 45 minutes or an hour ago, and at the start of this conversation, that applying a policy of this sort to existing non-residential commercial operations could be problematic. And I think the example was given of an automobile dealer of some sort that was maybe having an open house. I would maybe go a step further and talk about looking directly at the definition of special event that you've got in the guidelines. You talk about athletic tournaments or concerts. What about a concert hall? What about an indoor recreation facility that has athletic tournaments every day of the week? Do each of those require a special event permit, or are they limited to 4 of those events and then they can't have another one for the rest of the year? Obviously not. That's not the intent of the policy. But I do think in that sense there's a need to clarify to which sorts of operations this applies. And there may be a need in doing so to make an outside reference to zoning. If it's a use that is allowed by zoning, if it's either a permitted use of the site, consistent with the operation as has been permitted, non-residential operation, then there's no need for a special event permit. With that exception, I generally would advise the board to do whatever it can to stand clear of zoning. I appreciate the comments made by Mr. Passios before he left about the fact that there is a relationship here, and we've touched upon that with other specific cases that have come before the board. If a particular event is occurring, especially on residential property, that is clearly or has some indications of it being non-residential in scope, at what point does that property begin to transform from a residential property or a property that's dedicated to residential use to a property that has become more non-residential or commercial in nature? That's a question for the zoning enforcement official as to when something crosses that line. And there's no clear-cut line in zoning. If you wanted to work to try and craft something as part of a zoning bylaw or zoning bylaw amendment, that might be the place to put it. But even then, there's going to be some ambiguity, and there's going to be some discretion on the part of your zoning enforcement official to decide at what point does something, through repetitive use, sort of turn the corner from residential to non-residential because it is occurring with such frequency. And I think to speak to the specific case that was already referenced tonight, the Holman Street case, again, we can look at the history of that over a period of years when the first interpretation was that based upon the number of events that had occurred at the time, it had not transformed from a residential use of the property to a non-residential use. And my understanding is that there has been a different opinion issued more recently based upon a sequence of event after event after event over a lengthier period of time, that maybe now it has turned that corner from a residentially zoned property or residentially used property to a non-residential property. But this is a permitting process, or the better term may be a licensing process, separate and apart from zoning before a different board. And to suggest that you would be working cooperatively with the Zoning Board of Appeals, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, because they're 2 separate processes and they're meant to regulate different components of the use. If it's a zoning issue, it should be addressed through the zoning process. The purpose here is to provide some sort of licensing that gives you the ability to address public health concerns, public safety concerns, ensure that the operation is functioning in such a way that it is minimally invasive on the neighbors and on the town as a whole.
And I just, to add my architect's 2 cents to that, I almost look to, it's like what the building is built for as far as building code and the use that the building is permitted for, as far as like the bathroom amenities that come with a space. If you're holding events that are drawing in a number of people that clearly exceed what your plumbing count is for the occupancy of the building, that's
kind of a trigger, or just a means of egress for a building. So, I mean, if it's an indoor thing, but still, if you're putting a tent outside, I mean, I feel like anything that's bringing in the number of people where you're gonna need porta potties or something like that, or special Board of Health concerns, that's kind of what triggers it for me. And, I mean, commercial properties, some of them are built to handle certain amounts of traffic.
And some of them are.
And some aren't, yeah.
So I think to town council's point, are you looking for a clause similar to uses and activities permitted through the zoning bylaw shall not be considered special events?
I think that's a good start. I think it needs to be.
But something in that vein of.
I think so. I don't want somebody arguing then that a
Yeah.
use is so broad in the zoning bylaw that it encompasses X,
Yeah.
Y, or Z. So I think we could work on that language. I do recommend that something of that sort be included. If I could make one other comment,
Sure,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, and this just goes to the nature of these guidelines. And I remember a conversation that I had with you outside of a meeting when there was first the discussion of a potential set of guidelines or a policy for special events. And Mr. Alonso had referenced earlier the fact that you've got a citizen's petition on the upcoming town meeting warrant, questioned whether this is going to be adopted as a bylaw or a guideline. And to echo what you said, it might have even been my recommendation that this be adopted in the manner that was proposed many months ago. Obviously, much has occurred since then. But the idea was that there was nothing in place at the time, there continues to be nothing in place that provides the framework for reviewing these special events and issuing permits, at least not this extensively. There was some concern that whatever might be adopted, particularly if you proceeded directly to a bylaw, might not be sufficiently fluid or sufficiently subjective to give you the ability to learn through experience. What I found in many communities is when they adopt these as bylaws, they quickly find that something that they thought was going to work isn't quite working as they thought it might. By adopting it as a policy initially, which you have the authority to do, and you've done in many other, you've got pages and pages of selectmen's policies, as many communities do. By adopting it in that fashion, it gives you the ability to implement it, see how it's working, more easily modify it, simply by doing so at a meeting of the board with public notice. And then once you've got something that functions more fully and you know that it achieves your objective, potentially present that to town meeting for adoption. Now, that's just one perspective. There may be some that say, no, from the get-go, we want the voters to chime in on it. That's a different approach to this. So I can appreciate that. But I do think it gives you the ability then to see how it's functioning, see if it's working, and modify it more easily than having to wait until the next special or the next annual town meeting to bring it back before the voters. This is all complicated by the fact that you have a citizen's petition that seeks to adopt it as a bylaw. These guidelines are also quite subjective. And I'm in favor of subjective guidelines. They are, after all, called guidelines. I'm even in favor of subjective policies. Bylaws can tend to be more objective. That's okay, and I'm in favor of objective bylaws because it makes your job easier and it makes my job easier in having to interpret those bylaws. But the idea behind a policy, and even more so a guideline, is to provide a framework, but to give the permitting authority here, the Board of Selectmen, the authority on a case-by-case basis to subjectively review what's before it within the framework that's been created, and to impose the sorts of conditions that would provide the protections that we've heard referenced tonight from various different speakers and throughout them.
Great, thank you.
All right, so did anybody have anything in the first two, the definitions, other than a better definition? And
After
zoning.
the first section where it breaks, where it ends in place, says for events. I didn't know if in there we would just put, for the sake of really understanding the maximum per property, to say just that sentence where an event can be no more than 4 consecutive days. Like,
So
because we're saying a special event,
You're saying
there's
pull
only
it from
4 per
timing?
year, but a special event can be considered something 4 days or less, or
So you're suggesting shifting it from the timing section into that first section?
just include it in the definition, so it just reads there in the beginning that you would understand that a special event cannot be longer than 4 days. So, yeah, so when you're reading straight through it, you could understand right away that each property would be entitled to no more than 16 days worth of eventing at its max.
We'll have to debate that, because I'm not sure I want to encourage that.
Well, I just feel like if we are allowing that then a special event in its definition is technically a multi-day, could potentially be a multi-day.
Well, we say that later in the timing section, is what I'm saying. I think for the most part, we're talking about events that might not even be a day long.
Yep.
And then later on in timing, we say, if you're going to have a multiple day event, it still needs all these things.
I feel like we're going through the timing and the definition, events that occur multiple times, so on and so forth, how long. To me, when I read through it, that was just the one missing piece of information that describes everything else that's contained in those sentences. It was just where my mind was going with just being all-encompassing with the maximum amount of information there, but.
I have a different question. In the sentence, events that recur multiple times within a calendar year will not be considered special events. I don't really understand that because we're letting people have 4 events a year.
If you have the same event 4 times, it's no longer a special event, it's just an event. And it would need to be on a properly zoned parcel. So this isn't, so you don't create a monkeys riding pig race and say you're going to have it, every other Saturday in June and July.
So
Then it doesn't become special, then it's an event that you're creating and having repeatedly.
I guess I don't get that. I mean,
Couldn't you just
why couldn't
repeat
you-
it 4 times and then you're done?
Right.
Either way?
Right, I
So
mean,
even if-
I guess so. My take on what the board wanted to do was regulate special events, events that were special, that were a once a year, a once in a lifetime, a once every 5 years sort of thing, not try and permit a short-term business or a short-term event that someone comes and operates within the community. So it's not encouraging people to create an event that they hold at the limited number of times that you're allowed to over and over, where it's the same event over and over. It's, okay, we're going to have an elm festival, and we're going to make crafts out of elms, and we're going to talk about elms, and it's all going to be about elm trees. And then the next one is something completely different. So you're not, that becomes an event series, which I guess if you want to do it that way, that's fine. My impression was this was more of a one-time sort of thing. Stillman holds their country fair once a year. That's a special event. It's a thing. People go
yeah,
to it
but you're
because
letting
it's-
people have 4 events a year, so if they wanted to have the same event 4 times, I don't know that I would care.
I agree
mean,
with Phyllis, like if it was a seasonal
that's
Stillman's event and they did a spring, fall, summer, and winter, then they hit their 4, and it might be the same event, but same versus different, it's just I think quantity of events that really matters more than the content.
And I think that sentence is very confusing. People.
So, strike that? Is that what I'm
That
hearing?
would be my suggestion.
How does everyone else feel? I feel like just 4 events of
I
any
thought we were
type
making a
is-
list of things that we could deliberate at some other time. I didn't think we were trying to hammer down decisions tonight. So maybe what is a special event needs to also include whether it's special or not special.
I don't think we should be so specific as to define the event, let the events come to us, but just limit the amount. I don't want somebody to come in and us decide whether or not their event is different or not different, and then we're kind of being event choosers. And I don't really want to choose the content of an event, just whether or not there can be one. And then is it the same? Is it different? I think then we start debating the event versus just the permit itself.
All right, so we done with that first section? Other comments? In exemptions, I think that the note that I have to exempt commercial events located on business premises is unnecessary with the addition of the acknowledgement that zoning exists and some properties are there for that. So all I have is how to close the tractor trailer size loophole in membership events.
Yes.
Yes, because anybody could just claim that they've created a private membership organization and they're functioning under that, and then that allows guests. So yeah, it almost just can't even be there. It could eliminate everything if somebody just claimed that exemption.
Then there's nothing in permit posting. Timing, we have a discussion about whether 6 o'clock is an appropriate start time.
Could we say 6 o'clock?
Well,
Event
well,
dependent?
we're just kind of coming up with our issues. We're not discussing them.
Okay.
Thank you for including that.
How are we going to make edits if we're not discussing?
Oh, I
Just
guess
bring it back and
I think
we'll
in a
rediscuss.
subsequent meeting, I think.
I don't have anything in restrooms and trash cleanup. There is the discussion or thought about specifying a time period for cleanup.
I'm willing to just go with 48 right now and get that one off the list, if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I think
that's
2 days
fine.
of cleanup is reasonable.
Okay. Traffic and parking, I don't have anything. Okay, lots of head shaking, that's good. Signs, I have the addition of Mr. Passios' sentence about sign requirements and how they may be implemented.
And certainly no signs on street furniture.
Oh, street furniture is lights or...
I'm kidding.
But, okay, maybe I shouldn't use nomenclature. All right. Smoking, I'm happy to switch it to Mr. Passios's if that will make everybody happy. Again, not...
Can you remind me of what his was?
Smoking is prohibited in or on all town of Lunenburg properties, including on school grounds and all parks, fields, or playgrounds.
Sounds fine.
It's, 6 of one, half dozen of the other to me. Fireworks, I've got nothing. Tents, I've got the addition of the 400 square feet, or the alteration to 400 square feet. I don't know if you want to take out sleeping trailers, if you have additional things you'd like to do. Again, I see a lot of
Sounds good.
no comments, so I'll go with that. Security, traffic control, nothing. Buffer zone, it requires documentation now. It doesn't say input from abutters, but I would expect that this will be a public hearing, and thus input from abutters would be implied.
Right.
I think that's one that has
I
to stay
agree.
subjective too, because you don't know what you're trying to buffer.
Correct,
Right.
yeah. I mean, the Hug Festival, who wants a buffer from that? I'm going to assume that you're okay with the fire chief's alterations or proposed alterations to that section. Accessibility, event layout, I don't have anything in those. You guys seem pretty pleased with those. Then we get to enforcement, which has some work to do. And,
Is this
you know,
where we would add the violation
yes, we'd
language?
add policing powers and all of the fun stuff that goes along with that, and how the board can regulate it, what could trigger the board removing it, what the future penalties would be, all that kind of stuff. I guess that's the anti-Hug Festival. Insurance, I didn't hear any real jump at wanting to require alcohol insurance for non-alcohol permitted events.
I guess town council, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I can take a closer look at it. Towns struggle sometimes with insurance requirements. There's no harm in requiring insurance so long as it's not acting to bar or prohibit activities.
right,
Sometimes if you adopt too onerous of insurance requirements, it has that effect. The idea, as I understand it, behind the policy is, again, protection of public health, public safety, and there's an aspect of that if you've got individuals who are drinking on a site and then getting in their vehicles within the town. I'm not concerned about town liability necessarily, but I do think it makes some sense to have some minimum insurance requirements, which you've got. How far you go with those is really a matter for your discretion. But I can talk through that with Adam a bit, and if based on that conversation I have any further recommendations, I can bring them to you for your next review.
Yeah, we want to protect the town, but not make it so onerous that people can't apply for the permits.
That's the balancing act, right?
Additional permit costs, that's just kind of a howdy-do clause. And I guess that's the end of what I have. I don't know if you want to reference an appeal process as it exists in your policies. Is it codified in the policies, or is it better to do an individual within this document?
Mr. Chairman, through you. So I'll have to review the policies. I don't think that you've got it codified anywhere. I think that certain policies reference appeal processes and others don't. The lack of a reference within the policy doesn't mean that there's no appeal process. If it were a rule or a regulation, so there's a statute, Chapter 249, Section 4 in Massachusetts. It's a certiorari statute that essentially indicates that any sort of action that wouldn't otherwise be appealable, that there's no specific provision of law that provides for an appeal, gets appealed through Chapter 249, Section 4. And it's an appeal on the record. It's to a superior court or a district court. So that exists regardless of whether it's referenced or not. Some communities choose to reference it in bylaws and policies and such so that it's explicit and that there's no question that an individual is on notice of his or her appellate rights. So it's really, again, a matter of discretion for the board, but it's a simple provision to add if you'd like to add it.
So does it end up costing the town a lot of money if it ends up going to court?
So a lot is subjective in and of itself.
Is that a maybe?
Right. So it's not a full-blown trial track case. It's a review on the administrative record. So the way it works is a party files an appeal, you get served. You've got 90 days to file the administrative record, which means you compile whatever was before you when you made a determination and you submit it to the court. And then the case is resolved through an exchange of written motions. So is it inexpensive? No, there's no such thing as inexpensive litigation, but it's certainly not as costly as something that would be litigated for a period of 1 to 5 years and ultimately potentially end up at trial. There are no trials under the statute, so
But it exists whether we reference it or not.
it does.
But could we have an appeal process that was simpler and done within the town, sort of like the pavement management appeal process? Can we do something that's cheaper?
Who would be the appellate for the
It
Board
would
of
just
Selectmen?
come back to us and we already decided, right?
With zoning appeals, you have the zoning board of appeals. That's their bailiwick. They're not making the decision. The planning board, their appeal is through courts. The zoning board's appeal is through the court. There isn't a higher authority than the Board of Selectmen or an authority that's separate that operates in the same way.
And I can add to that, even if there was, you could provide for an internal process as a further system of checks and balances. You still wouldn't circumvent 249-4. So let's say that you said that there was an appeal from the Board of Selectmen to the ZBA, from the ZBA to the Planning Board. Even once that process was completed, there'd be a further appeal to court pursuant to the statute. So you really wouldn't be making things more efficient, you'd be making them less efficient.
Okay.
More time consuming, more costly.
And a longer administrative record.
All
right, I give up.
Maybe next time this comes, we might have a policy.
And I've kind of stopped updating the application because we keep changing this, and
No, that's fine.
I had a lot of red lines. So I think once this is buttoned up, we can go back and we can look at the application and really put together something that reflects what the final policy is. That will be hopefully cleaner and
Great.
hopefully only a page or two for people to
Okay.
push through.
All right.
Thank you for
Thank
all
you
your
all.
hard work on that. And thank you for town council for being with us through this.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Okay. Is the public hearing for auto dealer license Carlos Bismarck Torero here? Sir? Just give me 1 second, and this is a hearing?
There's a folder.
But this is a hearing, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's public hearing notice. The licensing authority will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, April 9th at 7 PM at Town Hall, 17 Main Street, second floor, Lunenburg, on the Class 2 auto dealer license application submitted by Carlos Bismarck Torero, doing business as National Motors Corp. The license is to be exercised at premises located at 40 Summer Street, Lunenburg, Mass. The applicant wishes to store and display 50 motor vehicles for sale and have hours of operation from 8 AM to 8 PM, Monday through Saturday, and by appointment only on Sundays. Board of Selectmen Licensing Authority, then, okay. That's it. Sir,
Oh, yeah.
how are you? Why don't you tell us what you are doing?
Well, I am planning to open the business and sell cars. And
So what is the business?
car sales,
Okay.
used car sales.
Used car sales?
Yes.
Okay, fine. There's items in your packet. Are there any questions for Mr. Torero?
No, everything looks like it's in order to me.
Okay.
Move we approve the Class 2 auto dealer license application for 40 Summer Street.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Are you?
Okay, sorry for making you wait.
That's okay.
Now you know about special event permitting.
Well, good luck with your business.
Thank you very much.
And you won't need a permit if you want to have a special event.
Okay.
Okay. So where's to pick this up tomorrow? Yes. Yeah, you can pick that up tomorrow at the office.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say goodbye. I would normally stick around for the end meeting, but I promised you sewer commission that I called down and I crossed out.
Thank you very much for being with us.
So almost set.
I think that's.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay, moving on, we have selectmen appointments to discuss. One is for a selectman member of the American with Disabilities Committee, and the second is for the selectman member of the Economic Development Committee. Do we have anything in the packet, or is that just a straight appointment?
No, straight up.
Okay.
So the first, the Americans with Disabilities Committee is an appointment made by the town manager, ratified by the Board of Selectmen. And the Economic Development Committee is an appointment made by the Board of Selectmen annually, and that's an ex officio member of that committee. Both Selectman Adams and Selectman McQuaid both expressed interest in the Americans with Disabilities Committee. I would like to recommend Selectman Adams to be appointed to the Americans with Disabilities Committee. She had expressed interest some time ago to be appointed to that committee. But with that recommendation, I would ask the board consider Selectman McQuaid for the other committee.
Well, on the other committee, I had expressed some concerns with that committee to Chairman Toll, and he said we could discuss those before the appointment was made.
Okay, so why don't we separate the two? Do you want to separate the two
Yes,
and do
I'd
the
like to.
Americans with Disability? Okay.
I'd nominate Kay Adams for the Americans with Disability.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you very much.
Okay, so prior to a motion to appoint a selectman to the Economic Development Committee, Ms. Luck did have a request to have a discussion, and please, go ahead.
Now, I appreciated that it says that this charge can be amended at any time, and I believe that now is the time to hit the reset button. When we received the MRPC implementation plan for recommendation from the 2017 report on the formation of a business-town partnership, it gives recommendations for creating an economic development committee, which are very different from the mission and the goals set in this Lunenburg Economic Development Committee. And I think we have to, as I said, I think we have to hit reset. The mission of the Lunenburg Economic Development Committee, according to the charge, is to promote ecotourism and agricultural business development within Lunenburg, provide advice to the Board of Selectmen on economic development policy, meet and work with current Lunenburg businesses and prospective businesses, coordinate its activities with the activities of the Conservation Commission, Open Space and Agricultural Commission, and to work cooperatively with businesses and state agencies to retain and promote current businesses in Lunenburg. My one question is, why are only ecological tourism and agricultural business development the only targets? There are many other types of businesses in Lunenburg. Lots of restaurants producing meals tax, for example. Ecological tourism, by definition, is the practice of touring natural habitats in a manner meant to minimize ecological impact. Tourism directed toward exotic, often threatened natural environments, intended to support conservation efforts and observe wildlife. Responsible travel to natural areas that conserves the environment, sustains the well-being of local people, and involves interpretation and education. How will ecological tourism drive Lunenburg's economic engine? The MRPC plan says the mission would be to promote balanced, long-term economic development by helping to attract, retain, and grow businesses by the implementation of an action plan of policy changes, infrastructure investments, and programmatic activities while maintaining the social, cultural, historic, and environmental attributes of the community. It would be beneficial to fund this group. Included should be local business owners, town officials, and volunteers. It sets out a process where you should review the economic development of the master plan, town zoning scheme, tax policies, road improvement plans, water, sewer, expansion plans as they relate to the town's ability to retain existing businesses and attract new businesses. We'll need to work with Board of Health, FinCom, sewer, water, fire, police, schools. The goals. Here are the goals. The goals. Establish and nurture supportive relationships with existing businesses and property owners. Work with the Lunenburg Business Association on ways the town can assist local businesses.
Ms. Luck, can I just ask a question? This is just a clarifying question. What are you quoting from now? This is MRPC's what?
No, this is the town manager's charge.
Okay.
So the goals in the town manager's charge: work collaboratively and seek out support and funding sources from local, regional, state, and federal organizations that would promote the mission of the Economic Development Committee. Provide education and outreach opportunities to encourage and facilitate economic development. Then the membership is conservation, someone from the Agricultural Commission that owns a business in Lunenburg, Open Space Committee, and a resident that's a Lunenburg business owner, and one member that's a resident and a property owner. I don't understand why the membership would not include someone representing the Lunenburg Water District, schools, police and fire, FinCom, Board of Health, Sewer Commission. When the town manager, Spidel, proposed the position of land use director, 2 of the 4 main benefits of hiring a land use director was that that position would direct efforts toward economic development and business retention and expansion, obtain grants for programs and services. Why isn't this the land use director's committee?
So,
It's
just from my recollection of why, I mean, we started with the MRPC thing, and we did a couple of hearings and outreach and whatever, and you brought it, you made the comment last meeting yourself, are we sure that we really want economic development? And every time we ask the question, we got a not really response from people. And the ecotourism and the agriculture were really the only 2 that we could get anyone to agree on. So I think that's how it got dialed back to just those elements.
The whole idea of economic development was a Board of Selectmen goal in the FY17 goal-setting process, and we did a number, as Mr. McQuaid mentioned, a number of charrettes and hearings and workshops, and frankly, the only interest at all was in the areas of farming and ecotourism, and even that, it was opinions of people that came to public hearings and not necessarily, as I recall it, actual business owners in either of those 2 spaces. And we have asked several times, and I'll agree with you, Mr. Selector, we've asked several times, does this town really want to do economic development? I personally believe that what the town has indicated is they want the businesses we have to thrive and to be successful, and there may be some businesses that we don't have that it would be nice to have in town, but by the same token, it wasn't quite clear what we could do as a committee of any sort to make that happen. So maybe it is time to reset, but the reason it's aimed at ecotourism and farming is that those were the people that came to the workshops and expressed an interest and wanted to continue it, and there was at least a certain amount of support on the Ag Committee and one member of the Board of Selectmen who's no longer with us, and the what I'll call the space, open space conservation type people. So that's where we got where we got. I think the town manager's charge was what we asked her to put together. If you're questioning whether we should still continue with that, that's a valid question, but I do believe we've actually invited people to name, from those other committees to name people, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but we can,
Go ahead.
we haven't formed it yet. We can hit the reset. I just don't, I think the goals are extremely difficult to be asking a conservation commission and an open space. You're asking people who are already doing a million things to do things that, the land use director should probably be coordinating.
Well, I'm not sure this is part of his job.
Mr.
I would disagree with that pretty strongly.
Well, what did I just got
The
that?
land use director is an ex officio member of that committee for that reason.
Oh, that's another thing. When we were at the November meeting, everyone said, oh, an ex officio member doesn't vote. And of course, I looked it up, and an ex officio committee member, under Robert's rules, it's a full-fledged member of the body with all the accompanying rights. An ex officio member has the same rights as the other committee members, but is not obligated to attend meetings of the committee and is not counted in determining a quorum if a quorum is present. Unless a charter or committee's bylaw prohibit it, an ex officio committee member is entitled to vote. I don't believe that we've used ex officio members in the past, and I don't understand what the purpose of this time.
And Mr. Chair, if I may give a couple of thoughts. I don't think I was supportive of this Economic Development Committee being formed primarily because economic development technically falls under the jurisdiction of the planning board, and when you look up the official definition, participating in economic development is in their charge, and it's not really in ours. So I felt it funny that we were creating the committee from our perspective, and I think that lends itself to some of what Phyllis is saying in regards to its connection with land use, more so than with Heather and us, is that land use is affiliated with the planning board, where economic development is actually legally charged.
And there isn't even a planning board member on it.
Which is funny. So I think what I worried about when I spoke about this, when we talked about it before, is taking a lot of people's time and putting together potentially wheel spinning without a clear outcome. What is the goal of a committee that isn't really even charged with this doing when we already have groups in place? We can certainly talk about our economy. We have things like Ecological Fibers who come in with questions. The planning board is charged with it. So we already have groups that we can focus on it as a topic without creating redundancy of having another group of people putting together a plan that we all should, be a part of. We're already here. It's creating layers and layers of committees where I think the work can be done in the groups that we already have.
Well, I agree with you for a lot of that, right up until the last statement where I think we can get it done with the boards we already have, because we've been talking about it for 12 years now, and nothing's been done on it. And I don't think it's the planning board's place to do economic development. And I've said this before, I think it's because it's their job to regulate the plans that come before them. They shouldn't be going out.
Well, they're charged with the
Drummond.
master plan of the town, and in association with creating master plan, there's an economic development component. I mean,
Right, but that
if you
doesn't-
look at the Massachusetts law and the definition of the planning board, it's in there.
Yeah, I know. I was on the planning board for 4 years. It's not, there's no active charge in the planning board to go out and drum up business.
Well, is there in the Conservation Commission?
No, that's why there's a separate,
But I
don't
mean, the
think-
Conservation Commissioner is also appointed to this committee.
right. I'm saying the planning board is kind of the regulatory commission that oversees economic, like a plan coming before them. It's their job to refine it and review it. It's kind of tough to go out and try to entice people to come in and then switch gears and then regulate them.
Well, I think we
I
make
think it's a separate role.
I think we make an environment as a government or a town that's attractive to businesses rather than drum up business. They have to choose to come. But I think we look for ways to make Lunenburg attractive, and that's, I mean, what is the permitting process like? How are people's interactions with us when they need something? I mean, we really can't go out and start a business or make a business, but make it good for people who want to do business. And so I think that's really where it lies, is in making it a good environment.
Again, I've been hearing the same words spoke for the past 10, 12 years. And administratively, things have gotten better as far as staff and creating the land use department and what have you, but it's still,
I feel
I
like
think doing business in Lunenburg compared to the neighboring towns is tremendously difficult.
it may be, but if we look at, Unitil coming and you start to brainstorm and look around, I think the economy has developed. And-
Unitil got put through the absolute ringer. I don't know why they didn't pull out of that project halfway
No,
through.
but I mean, the optimistic
didn't.
point of view is that they're here, a business came, and you can go all around that area, whether it's, Whalum Wash and this and that. I do feel that the economy,
But
And-
you cannot say the town was abundantly supportive of any
I
of that
didn't say
happening.
that.
It happened in spite of the town, not because of it.
Well, I don't think this is the answer. I mean, even on the membership, one member is a resident and a Lunenburg business owner. Why can't he be a business owner in without being a resident? Why can't it be somebody who owns a business who doesn't live in town?
I agree with Phyllis. I would like to make a motion that we put a hold on moving forward with this Economic Development Committee and maybe go back to the drawing board and understand what its intent and purpose is. And so my motion is to put this committee on hold.
I'd second that.
Any discussion?
I mean,
Go ahead.
at this point, I'm so frustrated with the whole idea of economic development. Everyone says, let's do it, until it's time to do it. And I said, no, we don't want to do that. So
I don't want to
I'm
do
ready to
this.
scrap the whole thing. I mean, it's
Not wanting to do this committee has nothing to do with being against economic development. It's just that this doesn't seem to have an outcome where it would achieve anything new.
The reason this rose to the level it did is because nobody was doing anything, and the board put it on our goal sheet in FY17. This is what became of an awful lot of public input, and when I say awful lot, I'm saying a lot of meetings where a few people came, and the few people that came leaned towards agriculture, and what I heard a million times was farm-to-table restaurants. I don't see one yet, and I don't see any road to get there. I don't object to the motion because I do think that, I hate to put a bunch of people on a committee
Right.
to do a lot of work that the town doesn't want them to do. So I would vote to approve the motion when we get there, but I think we have to decide what this town wants in terms of economic development. And the fact that the planning board might own the master plan, the planning board can't do the master plan without a lot of input from the rest of the town. And the economic development one, I agree with Mr. McQuaid that it's almost a contradiction that they regulate the businesses in town. They're probably not the first person or the first group that should be involved in attracting them.
Well, they can alter their regulations as a part of their attractability,
Agreed.
so there's a lot of control there.
and if the planning board has, made some pretty good zoning moves in certain areas of town, being Summer Street and the Village Center District, and I don't know if it's because people aren't aware of what they can do in those areas, if it's an awareness thing or what, but I don't think there's been one project that's come in and been applied for using the Summer Street overlay or the Village Center. So they put together these, what I think are good zoning bylaws, and they're not being used. So there's got to be I think there could be some group or some person charged with advertising or whatever to raise awareness of what we already have.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Town manager report.
Actually, can we,
What do you want to do?
Karen?
Oh,
We'll do
sure.
that piece
Sure.
first. As she's falling asleep.
Oh, that's okay. So we're going to move to the quarterly, where are we?
Hi, everyone.
Sorry.
What are we doing?
Is it
Quarterly report?
Sorry, the reimbursement
Reimbursement,
policy.
abatement of ambulance?
Yeah,
Okay.
which is,
Sorry, Karen, I didn't realize you were doing that.
Oh, no,
She-
that's okay.
She was just here for fun.
I'm here for support, and I
Oh,
wanted
you
to
know what?
hear
I saw
everything
next
I
week's, and I
heard.
saw you were doing the quarterly. Okay.
yeah, it's also the first section of my
Okay.
town manager's report too, so I'll just,
They have this, correct?
The policy?
Yes, the draft.
Okay. So this is a very simple reimbursement policy that I would like you to adopt, and it's a result of, well, you've seen it in our management report for a number of years. This practice is actually being used, but we never had a written policy in place, and it's been recommended by our auditors in the management report for a number of years that we have one. So what you're looking at is just a basic reimbursement policy that we would like you to adopt, so we can get that
I have a few,
removed from our management report.
I have a few suggestions. In the first paragraph, it says, "Such purchases must be made with," I would put prior approval of the department head, as opposed to approval.
Okay.
And down in the 4th paragraph, again, the town expects to be responsible for the expenses related to pre-approved professional development, and ensure that the cost of such travel is maintained at the lowest reasonable level. Costs such as hotel accommodations and food expenses are considered valid expenses, because that would be my.
I'm fine with all of that.
Any other questions or input?
No, I would make a motion that we adopt the reimbursement policy with the edits Phyllis recommended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
The second part of the issue is we have a very old, I want to say it's probably 20-plus years old, rescue wagon receivable balance of
Rescue wagon. That is old.
Yeah,
That
see?
is old.
And we still call it rescue wagon, I'll have you know. It's tough to change, it's tough to change. Anyway, this balance is $108,900.84, and like I said, that balance has remained unchanged for at least 20 years. The issue that we have is with all the moving that was done at Town Hall and all the problems that we had with the records, we don't have the detail that supports this balance. It's definitely uncollectible. It's 20 years old, so what I am requesting is that the board vote to abate this receivable so that we can get it off of the general ledger.
And that was the auditor's suggestion, right?
Yes.
Just to get rid of it?
And there's two pieces of it, because this ambulance receivable was when we used to do the collections here at Town Hall. We used to do all the billing and everything ourselves. And now we have a third-party billing company that actually does all of that for us. So this receivable is an old receivable. Like I said, it's at least 20-plus years old, so we're asking that this be abated. And we're also looking to create a policy so that for the newer receivable that we have with Coastal, we can do this on a more frequent basis so that what truly is uncollectible is taken off of the books. And the second piece of that is, even though we're considering it uncollectible, it doesn't mean that those funds can't be collected. They just wouldn't be posted against a receivable. They would be taken in directly as revenue. So that's all that does.
Can I get a motion to that effect?
Yeah, move we approve the abatement of the ambulance receivables as described.
Second?
Any discussion? All
Sounds
those
like
in
a good
favor?
idea.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Karen. Sorry to make you wait.
That's okay. This happens to me every time I come.
We gotta put her at the 7. She was here on time.
All right, so now we're going to continue. That was the first item on the town manager's report. We're going to continue with the rest of the town manager report.
Thank you, Karen. Just a reminder, the dementia-friendly kickoff event is Monday, May 20th at 6 p.m. at the library. And also the information sessions about community solar are tomorrow, April 10th at 6:30 in the Lunenburg Middle School Collaborative Room, D132, and Saturday, April 13th at 10 a.m. in the library. The recycling education campaign, there will be recycling tips article in the Lunenburg Ledger in the town-wide edition on April 12th, and in the annual town meeting booklet that gets mailed to every household. The Senior Tax Work-Off Committee, the topic of amending the senior work-off program regulations to increase the hourly wage and maximum abatement for eligible seniors in this program was on the assessor's agenda for tonight. I did sit in on that meeting. The chairman of the Senior Work-Off Committee went to the meeting and spoke to that effect. The assessors did endorse the proposed changes, so that will be a recommendation made at a future Board of Selectmen's meeting from the Senior Work-Off Committee. MRPC walkability and parking study. Department heads met with a principal planner from Montechusett Regional Planning Commission on April 8th regarding the walkability and parking study that we requested last March. Although usually a walkability and parking study focuses on one area, the planner identified 2 areas in town that had a cluster of points of interest that would benefit from this study. The 2 identified areas were the town center and the Whalum area. The type of information that will be looked at to assess walkability will include traffic data, accident data, and existing sidewalks. MRPC staff will assess parking in these areas separately. To reiterate, this will be the first of multiple meetings, and MRPC will get input from all the stakeholders and public by the end of the study. Procurement manual for town departments. As part of my annual goals, I've completed a draft procurement manual. The manual includes written procedures for town departments for the proper procurement of supplies, services, and construction projects. The town has never had a written procedural manual, and this will be a good guide for departments to reference that encompasses our internal procedures for creating requisitions and purchase orders through Munis. Having written procedures with internal checks and balances not only ensures compliance with the law, but also is a control against fraud. Meetings, the Finance Committee will be meeting this Thursday, April 11th at 7 p.m., and on Thursday, April 25th at 7 p.m. I will be stopping by the community service learning presentations that are being held tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. in the high school, and the information session with Nexamp on community solar at 6:30 at the school. And Town Council will be holding monthly office hours April 24th from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. and on May 20th from noon till 4.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Sure.
How did you do with the Nexamp for remaining town departments?
We can sign up for that to get a discount. We have to give them all our electricity bills, so that would be the next step in the process.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All righty, moving on. We don't have any minutes. We do have warrants. Or warrant. Accounts payable in the amount of $552,144.33. Is there any action file issues?
I would like to revisit the debt policy, as the FinCom chair recommends. In a year such as this, where we experience a windfall health insurance decrease in premiums, or other unanticipated break, we should have a policy that to use that money to either reduce debt or put it aside so that next year capital plan will be able to use more cash and avoid further borrowing. So either reduce the debt or figure out a way to avoid further borrowing. That's it.
So a future meeting with the Finance Committee?
Finance Committee, the board, whoever needs to be involved.
Okay. Any committee reports?
No.
No other department reports?
No.
Okay. We have ATM articles that were deferred, and there is a final draft in your
About
packet.
the final.
That was so stressful. That was the first meeting I missed in over 2 years, both as a citizen and a selectman. And that goes for any workshop or anything that popped up. And it was down to the wire. I just couldn't pull it off. There's a high fever at home.
Yep, life's what happens when you're making plans, right?
Okay, so what are the ones that we are still outstanding?
Okay. Article 4 was deferred, which I think you wanted to wait anyways, because to wait for the final amount for prior year expenses. We have one bill from a prior year expense, but
Right.
usually that's,
So we'll wait and make that after presentation at town meeting. Is that correct? Is that okay with everybody?
Sure, I'm looking for the articles loaded up in here. Do I have to?
it says final.
There, it says exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect.
Okay, so we're going to leave that as deferred. Okay? What's the next one?
Article 5 was transfers within the fiscal 19 budget. And I assume you want to wait till town meeting for that as well.
Yep. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're deferring anything the Finance Committee deferred, right?
Yeah,
one?
pretty much.
Right.
Well, we deferred 6.
That was the capital plan.
They recommended approval, just FYI.
We didn't want to recommend approval for anything we didn't think we could have a
Right.
3-to-1 vote on anyway, so.
Right, okay.
Not sure we're going to get a 3-to-1 vote on that one tonight unless we want to take it up. Anyone
What was
else?
that? Was that on your list, 6?
Yes.
Okay. Do we want to take this up now, or do we want to do it at town meeting? Number 6.
Article 6. I'd rather defer it myself.
I'm okay with that.
Deferring's
Okay.
fine.
What's the next one? Yeah.
Article 7 for the fiscal 20 budget.
Well, I don't know, should we have a discussion about it, or should we, you know?
Oh, we can have it now, or we could have it at town meeting.
Or both.
Or both, right,
Hopefully don't repeat ourselves too much.
right. You know, I just really have serious issues with the 2 new hires. So if we want to discuss it, we can.
Well, I guess, I mean, to recommend not approving the budget because of those 2 issues, that's a pretty significant point. And I personally believe that's a staffing decision within the authority of the town manager to get the work done that she believes needs to get done. She's not looking for additional money to do that. She's doing it within the budget she has. So I would support her budget in its total.
Mr. Chair, if I may comment on that, in terms of, I don't think it would be questioning whether or not she has the authority to add the position, but whether or not it is the right thing for the budget. So she may have the authority to have put that in the budget, but it doesn't mean it needs to be there.
Well, maybe I misspoke. I think she's much better informed as to whether that's a requirement to get the job done within her organization, and therefore I support her recommendation.
I would just like to comment on just adding staff, whether it's sitting through all finance committee meetings in the past or studying the public safety history, both through EMTs, patrol officers, watching a lot of the stress, you know, anytime the school looks at changes with their budget and how that impacts their staffing. With the population boom in my daughter's kindergarten class, it triggers mandated teachers to reach certain criteria. So staffing is something that is so important and so expensive in so many places. The fact that 2 jobs basically surfaced without ever being parts of open meetings or open discussions, I feel like they may be the correct jobs for the town to have as part of their team of employees once we've been shown the need or shown even the request for it. It showed up in the budget without it coming as a request or a concept at any point. And so for this year, I don't think it's the right time to add staff positions that really surfaced out of nowhere when we have staff positions like inadequate patrol officers that we know we have. So staffing is expensive and important, and I wouldn't support the budget based on all the stress trying to staff correctly other departments have that we're adding positions that we never heard we needed.
All right,
And
I
I
just
would
want to
like
make the point that it wasn't brought up at the last minute. This has been part of the staff plan for years, and it's been held
let's
back.
go
It's-
to
it's been- Can
November.
I finish, please? And it's been held back due to constraints in terms of financing. It came forward this year because it was able to be done within the allocated budget. And it has been on our radar since February 15th.
It's just
May-
just as a process point. If on the floor of town meeting, the two positions get taken out, do we also have to say where the money's gonna go? Because we've altered the budget?
It would alter the raise and appropriation amount, so there would either be excess levy capacity, or it would be amended to be moved elsewhere.
Well, we are talking about two different things. We're talking about whether the board, as a board, recommends approval of the article, which is the whole budget.
Right.
And then we're talking about, is someone planning on making an amendment to that budget? And I'm not recommending that we do that, but
Right. No, I just want to make clear that if someone's going to fight against it, they got to do something else with the money besides say we don't want
What
it.
does excess levy capacity mean? Where does that, does it just get saved?
Right, it's not raised in Texas.
See, if we have extra money for staffing, I would rather personally, based on just future content, see a patrol officer added to what we know we need and/or staff in the school. This position was never publicly identified as a need, and I think we want to look at it a little bit more closely and maybe add it into next year's budget when we really understand why we've added two positions without, I mean, it may have been here in the past as a discussion. I certainly never heard it in the couple years that I've been following everything so very closely. However, there's things like the patrol officers that we know we're behind, and the resistance to adding is the cost of staffing. So here we have two positions we're adding without really looking at the bigger picture. So just based on the fact, I think, to put a budget and just say, because it's the budget, we need to recommend it, then I think then there's no process and there's no pause for reflection. And there's certainly a lot of stress that comes when people see the budget and how it impacts cuts and things other people get. I don't want to just get it and then say, okay, we got it and therefore it is. So I would say that I don't recommend the budget just based on the fact that those two staffing positions, to me, are not ones I support and therefore could not support the budget.
I would like to have an opportunity to say something. I watched the 11-6 BOS discussion. I had asked that we start discussing the budget earlier. And so the town manager agreed and put it on the November 6th agenda that we have a FY20 budget and BOS priorities discussion. The town manager was asked by Selectman Ebersol to articulate challenges. She stated health insurance and keeping to the 10-year plan for police and fire personnel. She was asked specifically by Selectman Ebersol if there were any other new hires in play, and she said no. We are not expanding any departments above police and fire. This was in November. Then the chair said, people costs are sensitive to the marketplace. OPEB and benefits have an effect for years to come, so we need to be very cautious as we grow. As a result of that discussion, I relaxed and was confident there'd be no personnel surprises until the preliminary budget was presented on February 14th. At the next BOS meeting, I expressed my surprise. At the March 12th meeting, the BOS voted to not support these hires. Yet, they are still in the budget. Preliminary budget needs to mean preliminary. It needs to be presented far enough in advance so that the BOS has an opportunity to weigh in and make changes where appropriate. When would that be? When should we be starting this discussion? In July?
And to that point, information we have in November should be consistent with what rolls into the budget.
And I guess where did the money come from, these hires? Is it from the health insurance money?
It was within The operating budget. This,
But I mean,
what do you mean, where did it come from?
Well, you know, we have like about $2.5 million in health insurance costs, right? Those were reduced 10% this year. You put 8% in the budget, and then it came in at minus 2.45.
For active employees.
So that's 10%. So that's sort of, no, active and retirees, right? Oh, no, just active. Okay. So that's over $100,000. Where was that money reallocated?
School.
So what percentage is the school getting now?
3%.
3.
That's in the recommended budget.
So the insurance money went to schools. Good.
I just want to reiterate that as a board, what we are being asked to do is to recommend or not recommend approval of the budget.
Correct.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that I do not recommend approval of the budget based on my lack of support for the 2 staffing positions.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I do support the budget.
So do I.
And I guess, for the sake of discussion, I think, like Phyllis said, there has to be a point where the budget can be adapted to the request of anybody who's participating, whether it's through public hearings or through our own input or research. And so in the absence of an opportunity to actually implement change in the budget, just simply not recommending approval seems to be all we're left with.
Right.
Not to be adversarial, but to just say, this is our feeling, something in there does not feel right, and therefore arbitrarily going along with a recommendation is against not feeling comfortable with it. I'd take a patrol officer or a teacher over the positions recommended.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
a
I've
unique
got a lot-
situation
I've
where there's
got a-
only 4 of us.
Right.
If you had 3 people who agreed,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that it was not a good position, then sure. We're in a unique position
And I should
right
point
now.
out that because of that unique position, our choice at this point in time is, as a board, if it votes 2-2, then we are not going to make a recommendation. We're not going to say we recommend approval, and we're not going to say we recommend not approval, because as a board, we don't have a consensus. If you want to speak about changing it, you speak as an individual.
I mean, I could go on. I've got pages of issues with both of those positions, but I don't think you want to hear those.
I think we would just want to document, instead of deferred or recommended or not recommended, we could say 2 recommended, 2 did not recommend.
No, the board does not have a position.
Well, they do have a position.
No, they don't. Let's take the
Okay.
vote.
No,
All
I,
those in favor
Of the,
of not recommended.
of your motion?
Aye.
aye.
Those opposed? Nay. All right, so now the board does not have a position.
And we do not recommend approval, because that would have required 3.
No, we don't have a recommendation. And that's what we should report.
We neither are in the positive or the negative.
Sure.
And it is an unfortunate situation that we are in.
But I think, like Phyllis mentioned, we already did make a vote that we didn't support that, and nothing changed, so we just have to follow through that.
Well, you didn't support the head count, I agree, but now we're talking about the whole budget.
But because that's in there, I think to be consistent, it's fair to not support it based on that portion.
No, because the article is the whole budget, and we don't have a position.
And I don't support the whole budget, so,
And 2 of you don't support it, and 2 of us do, so we don't have a position.
okay.
Article 8 will be presented at town meeting, so I would assume defer that one till then.
Right. There's a presentation by the Personnel Committee or somebody, right?
Yes. And next one would be Article 21 through 24.
Like me to read it this time? Got criticized last time. Article 21 is to see if the town will vote to transfer the care, custody, and control of the land and/or buildings thereon known as the primary school building and property located at 30 School Street, shown on Assessors Map 071, Lot 076, from the Board of Selectmen for general purposes, to the Board of Selectmen for general purposes, and for the purpose of conveyance, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to convey a fee simple interest or any portion thereof, or to lease the property on such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen deem to be in the best interest of the town, and to execute any and all agreements and documents to effectuate the said sale or lease of any of the properties and any portion thereof, and to authorize and or reauthorize the Board of Selectmen to sell and or lease the parcel and or building situated thereon, and or subdivide in any manner said parcels and or buildings situated, and or take any legal action necessary to effectuate the sale, lease, subdivision, and or transfer of said land and buildings situated thereon, or take any action relative thereto. This is on there, in my understanding, to respond to the request made by the APDC that we maintain the building, and also to address the fact that there are a good number of people in town who would like to see us demolish the building. To me, to demolish the building, we need to prove that no one wants it. And also that it's cost prohibitive or impractical to fix it up. So we need to take some effort to see if there's anyone out there who would restore the building. And it's by lease. We can try that first. I know that makes more people more comfortable. If that doesn't work, then it gives us the authority to try to sell it. But it's in an effort to avoid over $2 million worth of repairs that need to be done on the building. If the APDC says we got to keep it, and they can say we just have to keep it till it falls in on itself, or I mean, it's a good faith effort to show them that we tried to repurpose it, and we're going to do the best we can to make that happen.
Okay, Mr. Chair, if I may, this is not an article that's associated really with restoring a building. It's an article giving us the right to convey a piece of historic municipal land.
No, it's about the building.
I let you finish. Let me just.
First time ever, thank you.
Oh, my. Okay, so Article 21 is a land conveyance article to convey Old Primary. This there was a conveyance article voted down November 2016 involving this parcel. There was a land conveyance article in May 2018 voted down to convey this piece of land. I think this land may be something we convey in the future, but we can convey it through town meeting. We can convey it when we actually have a plan. This article is simply just giving us the power to choose what to do with a piece of land. And us is right now us four. In a couple of months, we don't know the configuration of who's here and what their opinions are. So I find this article extremely risky because the land can be conveyed by the town for a purpose that benefits the building and or the land. The power doesn't need to be shifted. It's some type of power grab to take away a power that belongs with the people. So and involving the APDC, they recommended that we no longer participate in demolition by neglect. And I agree. The building should either be repaired or removed. They said they wouldn't support removing it, but actually we haven't even attempted to ask them if we could. We haven't gone through the process, so we don't know if we might be able to get a yes on removal. So it's entirely premature to give us the power to do what we wish with the land. Based on those opinions, I would like to make a motion that we do not recommend approval of Article 21, the carts before the horse. We need to secure our plan to go to TCP, if that's what we're doing, before we relinquish a piece of valuable municipal land that could be part of a solution. In the absence of a plan, this article shouldn't be here for a third time with still no plan. So my motion is to not recommend approval of Article 21. It's too soon.
Second?
There's nothing too soon about this. We've been talking about it forever.
And we've said no twice.
We are in a stalemate. You can't try to get somebody to fix up the building. You can't say, I have a building, would you like to fix it up? Well, do you have the authority to give it to me? No. Are you going to have the authority to give it to me? Maybe, but I have to wait to town meeting, and they may or may not say I have the authority to even talk to you about it. It's going to sit there and rot till it falls down. It's
Right, and it's a
ridiculous.
piece
It's
of
an
land.
eyesore. No, it's
It's a piece of land, and the town has
it's a
shown-
building first.
It's a piece of land long-term. The buildings come and go in a variety of ways, even through their own disasters. The land is forever.
We have the APDC, who's told us to do something with it.
Correct.
Fix it up, or find someone else to fix it up.
It may be cheaper to put town hall there than TCP. Let's investigate both buildings.
It's not. We did that.
It's just premature to give us the authority to sell it without a direction.
You
officially
can't get
chosen.
a direction without the
No,
authority to do something
The
with
point
it.
being, if we have funding from the town to do a town hall at TCP, and they vote yes through town meeting, $20 million, and we break ground
It's
on
not
a town
$20
hall.
million. It's absolute. Stop throwing out numbers that you just pull out of nowhere. You spreading false information.
No, it's not false information, it's a hypothetical.
We're not-
I'm saying the town approves a project, we break ground on it. Now we can look at parcels and say whether or not we need them. We have not broken ground or approved any plan, extremely premature, to relinquish a piece of
This
valuable
is part
historic
of
municipal
putting
land.
together the plan. Every time we go, they say we need a holistic plan.
No, I'm not saying holistic plan, I'm saying.
No, I'm saying every time we go to town meeting, and the reason it gets shot down
So
is
there's a
because
motion
we
and a
don't,
second.
and we're having a discussion. I think the chair has to call the vote.
That's right.
Every time we go to town meeting, they ask for more information and a holistic plan. They're going to say, you'd like to do this with TCP.
So what's our plan with the land? What's your plan?
Can I finish now?
Yeah, with the plan.
They're going to ask, okay, you would like to move town offices to TCP. What are you going to do with the rest of the buildings? You say, I don't know. Let me build the TCP first. And they say, no, you don't have a plan for the rest of the buildings. If you want to have any type of parallel running plan where you have some type of holistic master plan put together, you need to be able to work on things at the same time. Everyone keeps trying to poke in one direction, and then it always gets shut down. Where's the holistic plan? You're never going to get that unless you have the authority to talk to somebody and say, would you like to do something with this? Can I do something with this? It's a stalemate that we're never going to get over unless somebody has the ability to do something with the buildings.
I think it's
And
a dangerous power grab.
And I support it in direct response to the APDC, who has told us to spend money on it, which I think would be ludicrous, or to sell it.
And it's not a power grab, because to dispose of it, it has to go through the procurement process and RFP, which is a completely open and public process.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote. The motion was to not recommend approval. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay.
Nay.
All right, so we don't have a recommendation on that one either. 22?
Do you want me to read that?
Sure.
Okay. See if the town will vote to transfer the care, custody, and control of the land and/or buildings thereon known as the Brooks House and property located at 1033 Mass Ave, shown on Assessor's Map 60, Lot 55, from the Board of Selectmen for general purposes to the Board of Selectmen for general purposes and for the purpose of conveyance, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to convey a fee simple interest or any portion thereof, or to lease the property on such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen deem to be in the best interest of the town, and to execute any and all agreements and documents to effectuate said sale or lease of any of the properties and portion thereof, and to authorize and/or reauthorize the Board of Selectmen to sell and/or lease a parcel and/or building situated thereon, and/or subdivide in any manner said parcels and/or buildings situated and/or take any legal action necessary to effectuate the sale, lease, subdivision, and/or transfer of said land and buildings situated thereon. So, same situation with the Brooks House.
And again, the APDC expressed that the first choice would be to have the building stay there. The following article would be if nobody wants it and to keep it there, then we try to move the building and keep the land. But it's to follow a very successful model that took place with the Jones House, which was a result of the town trying to own property and lease it out and being a terrible landlord, and the building fell in disrepair. We found somebody who wanted to fix it up and have it be a private residence. We went through the RFP process. We put stipulations in there that they had to fix it up and do certain improvements, certain specific improvements that were laid out by the Historic Commission to the facade of the building. And we found someone who did that and fixed it up, and it's a great-looking building in the center of town now.
Heather, has the town done any work to define or work through all the confusion with that parcel of land in terms of there not being a true egress or the drainage easements from the library being on the parcel? In terms of the viability of being able to sell the piece of land, have we legally produced any ability to sell that parcel?
So you're talking about separating it out?
So the land itself has drainage easements from the library on it. It has no egress, no parking. In terms of being a viable lot to sell, can we even sell something that has?
It hasn't even been established as a lot yet.
Correct. So is it a bit premature?
No.
To be taking conveyance of something that we haven't understood? Because my understanding was we were going to discuss this with the library and whatnot, because that parcel impacts library parking and different things in that are. So being able to convey it to somebody else without understanding its impact on everybody.
We are still trying to schedule a workshop with the so-called abutters, the library, the teen center, the senior center. We've had some trouble scheduling that. When we get to our upcoming schedule, we're going to propose the week of the 30th. But as Mr. McQuaid said, I prefer Article 23, which is actually selling the building and keeping the land. But this gives us some flexibility. If someone has a plan that's a reasonable plan that fits into what we need done, it gives us the ability to listen to such plans similar to the Jones House.
My issue is conveying town land. We just don't have much land in the center. And I think we're going to regret selling any of it.
I agree with Phyllis. It's all we have left, and we can't recover it or reclaim it.
Yeah, but we're not.
Look where it is. It's next to the library. It's next to the schools. It's just, I don't know.
It's part of a campus.
I can't. It's town. It's town land. I just can't.
Do you regret selling the Jones House?
That was a residential house in a residential area. It's a little different than the campus setting that we're dealing with there.
It's
A couple hundred feet away.
It's very, if you think about it, there's the library, there's the school buildings. It's
There's a
it's
house
a
right next. There's a
island
house
by
right on the other side of
itself.
Memorial Drive, though.
People live across the street.
People do live across the street.
Okay, I would like to make a recommendation that we don't support Article 22 and 23 for the nature that they...
Oh, don't put 22 and 23 together.
Together, okay, that we don't support Article 22 because it involves land conveyance of parcels in the center of town that we would prefer to retain.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay. Okay, so we don't have a recommendation on 22. 23.
To see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to convey the building known as the Brooks House located at 1033 Mass Ave, which Property is shown on Assessor's Map 60, Lot 55, from the Board of Selectmen for general purposes to the Board of Selectmen for the purpose of conveyance, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to sell said building and take any legal action necessary to effectuate the sale of said building. So this is just for the sale of the building.
I make a motion that we approve Article 23.
Recommend approval.
Recommend approval for Article 23.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
For discussion, I'm torn on this one. I love town history. That is the farmhouse that owned the whole parcel that the schools were all built on. I think it's a house that is a kind of a part of the landscape, and maybe
You just said it was a terrible eyesore in that part of the landscape.
I'd never called it a terrible eyesore.
You said it doesn't belong being a house in that part of the landscape.
I did not say that.
That's what Article 22 is. It allows someone to make it be a house.
No, not conveying it was the nature of my opinion there. I didn't say it was an eyesore. I actually think
So
it's
who's
cute.
going to fix it up then? How
It
are we going to
costs-
turn that into a
I believe the
house?
Tapé had it for demolition is about $40,000. And I mean, that could be, okay, well then, what could $40,000 worth of capital do to the building? Brainstorm a little bit.
Nothing. You're not fixing that up for $40,000 to rent it to somebody.
And
Absolutely
I doubt
not.
somebody will buy it. It costs at least $30,000 just to have it lifted and transported. So I feel like,
But you just said you didn't want to sell it in 22.
So you boiled it down to knocking it down is about it.
Well, I haven't voted against recommending Article 23. I'm just saying I don't mind that building, and it has a little piece of history that I always have a hard time letting go of.
The motion was to recommend approval. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Any opposed?
I'll oppose it.
You'll oppose it. Okay. So we recommend approval
You
of
don't
23.
have to, you just sort of swore, Damon. That's really inappropriate.
Really?
I'm entitled to have a vote. I don't appreciate Jesus Christ as a response to my opinion on an article.
I'll say a Hail Mary before bed.
It's not I'm not joking. I find it
I'm
extremely
not either. It's
offensive.
absolutely ridiculous the way you twist words, even back-to-back articles, just so you can feel right.
I think I've been extremely consistent on my feeling towards
Article
land
24.
conveyance and ownership.
Article 24.
Right. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds a sum of money for the design and engineering to consolidate town offices, school uses, and community space at the building and land known as TC Passios, located at 1079 Mass Ave, shown on Assessor's Map 60, Lot 55, and any all incidental and related cost, including but not limited to site evaluation, engineering, and final design services. And this is a figure we're waiting on as well, so assume you want to defer that.
We're going to have that figure by town meeting?
Yes.
So we recommend waiting till town meeting. Is that agreed?
Is that what you'd like to do?
Well,
Well-
we're going to have a number to attach to it. We're asking the town to fund the engineering to move forward with our plan of record to move the
So we need-
municipal offices.
so we
So
need a
we should have an idea how much we're talking about.
Sure.
Yeah, makes sense.
Is that it?
And will we have that amount?
By town meeting.
Can we have it before and maybe revisit the topic?
If we have
in
it
a
before, I'll provide it to the board.
meeting? Okay.
That's it?
33 was also deferred. And as well as all the 30.
Citizen ones?
Yes.
So Article 23,
33.
33, I'm sorry, I'm looking at 33, was born out of information from O'Brien Homes. I've followed the topic at planning board meetings. I would feel very comfortable making a motion to recommend Article 33.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I'd like to have the information presented to me before I recommend it.
The planning board is making a presentation.
Yeah, I think I'd like to hear what they have to say as well.
Okay.
But there was a motion and a second. Do you want to withdraw that and hold till the presentation, Mrs. Adams?
No, I've heard it and seen it.
Yeah, but the
so,
rest of us haven't.
I guess we'll leave it as deferred. Then I would withdraw my motion.
Thank
to
you.
leave it as
I'll
deferred.
withdraw my second.
Thank you.
And the rest of them are all citizen petitions?
Yes.
Yeah, unless anybody objects, I think I'd like to hear the citizens present
Oh,
why
right,
they
yeah,
want what
right.
they want.
I agree to leave them deferred as we learn more about them.
And.
And we got a note today.
Yes,
Although,
article,
I'm sorry, which article number is the bylaw?
Special permit? 41 is a special permit.
40 and 41.
Special permit guidelines. I'm not sure how you feel, but I feel like we've worked hard on our own policy and we understand where we're heading. So based on that, rather than deferring, I do feel that I would not recommend these guidelines, having not gone through the process of what we're working on. It's sort of counter to the work we're doing, so I'm not sure.
I'd actually just like to keep it as a data point and see what people have to say, honestly.
I think the one big difference is they're talking about an actual bylaw and we're talking about a guideline.
But their policy will null and void their bylaw will null and void our policy because it'll override
Yeah, but
it.
they may get amendments or discussions that we could live with. I don't see any harm in waiting till after that whole debate is over. Just prior to maybe we could ask the moderator that we weigh in just prior to the vote.
And maybe we can talk about it again, too, because it would be, if it becomes a bylaw, then, the way it is, then we'll have our work cut out for us amending it at
Actually, I
subsequent town meetings.
I put them next to each other today, and there's not that much difference. There's a couple of key points, but in listening to the town council, I'm not so sure I want it to go out of the gate as a bylaw. I think there's some real benefit.
Yeah, right. No, I agree.
Yes, I
So-
liked how he said, as the policy, we understand the unintended consequences and can mold it better. That's why I would be against this, just by the fear of having a bylaw that we haven't, because we're the ones who have to issue the special event permit. It's going to be very stressful to be under a set of bylaws that we really haven't interfaced with. Therefore, I feel uncomfortable with the articles.
So we're going to have to really sell that it shouldn't pass.
I
But I still think I'd like to hear the presentation and the discussion before we weigh in.
I almost said this when we were talking about it earlier, but I honestly don't think if we had the burden of trying to put this through town meeting as a bylaw, I do not think it would ever pass, honestly. Just because of the degree to which you're telling people what they can do with their property. That's my forecast. Myself, I could be proven wrong, but in that same vein, if we couldn't get it approved as a bylaw, should we really be using it as a policy? Just my thought.
So where do you come down on making a recommendation?
I would like to make the recommendation after hearing the discussion on town floor, because I'd like an honest response from the public before we weigh in on it.
I'm fine with that.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
That's fine. And then we're consistently deferring the citizen petition articles so
Yeah,
that we
that's
learn
right.
more.
And then we got word today that the last one, I think, was they're going to pass over, right?
yes,
Okay.
Which one is that?
43, the last article.
The person that proposed it is withdrawing it or
Yes.
gonna pass over it or whatever. Okay, that's it on the warrant articles? Okay, superb. Upcoming event schedule. We have a meeting next week. The town manager will not be with us. She's on vacation. Judging by what's on the calendar, I'm going to recommend that we do not meet on the 23rd. There's not that much. In fact, even next week is a little light. But we are trying to schedule the abutters workshop And we're going to shoot to try to do that during the week of April 30th, so that we at least have had all our workshops on
Okay, great.
the Passios. And if it pleases the board, I'd like to schedule and post an 8 a.m. meeting on the morning of town meeting. We traditionally do that in case there's anything we need to
Yep.
Yes.
cover.
Okay. Did you say no meeting on April 23rd?
On the 23rd. All right, so we'll meet the 16th. We will then have a workshop sometime the week of the 30th, and an 8 a.m. meeting on the morning of the town meeting, May 4th. Is there any public comment from the public? Please.
Ron DeLisio, 181 Reservoir Road. I just have a comment on Article 24 regarding the TCP option for municipal offices. I don't think it's entirely accurate to refer to it as a consolidation, which means not only to join and make whole, but to solidify and compact. I think it's more accurate to call it a massive expansion, which is what it is when you go from 12,500 square feet of building space to potentially 55,000. And I was disappointed that the recent BOS meeting, which was held to discuss space needs, occurred at 1 in the afternoon and was not recorded. I would have liked to hear how these space requests can possibly be justified. And when I researched the national average for office space per municipal employee, the numbers I found were 50 to 100 square feet per employee. Thank you.
Is there any public comment from the board?
Sure. My comment would be, thank you to the public commenter. I've always agreed that the TC Passios is far too large of a building for long-term maintenance and utilities, which is why I've advocated for this to not be the direction we head in.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everybody. Enjoy your vacation.